Chapter 1, Caring Not for the Past. It matters not whether you are a virtuous individual or merely someone seeking their present desires. Yet, these two kinds of people share a distinctive trait, the impulses of the moment. A person of virtue acts without second thought, whether to rescue another or perform good deeds. Conversely, one pursuing immediate gratification always carries the notion that their melancholic end might arrive at any juncture. As for myself, I was a young man whom everyone classified as a do-gooder, someone always aiding those in need without pondering the aftermath. And so it was that I became embroiled in a dire situation that required the aid of a valiant soul. Thus, it was I who hurled myself into the icy clutches of the foulest beast a naive child like me could confront without a second thought. By icy clutches, I mean that within seconds, my body felt cold, invaded by a frigid sense of desperation as my wounds bled uncontrollably. If only I hadn't saved that girl from the attack of that dog, perhaps I could have witnessed a new dawn. But such matters did not concern me when I acted, it was instinctive, fueled by my desires. At least that girl would lead a life free from the scar on her face. As for me, I was slowly being embraced by darkness. Yet, after what felt like an eternity in just a few minutes, I learned that I hadn't released the dog until that girl managed to escape. When my body weakened, I could not move, my eyes closed gradually. And from personal experience, I can tell you that the sensation of death doesn't exist. It's merely something that pulls you into a tranquil darkness without seeking permission, all while considering your desires. I could swear, as long as I have life left in me, that death asks whether you wish to join it or return. However, it's not a direct question, but rather something instinctual. In my situation, at least, I couldn't return, but someone else could in circumstances that don't involve bleeding out. It's by wishing to live for someone else that you find your way back. Such was my perception. To die at the age of 13 isn't what one would call life. I hadn't even experienced my first love. At least now, I know that I cannot best a wolf in a one-on-one fight. All I want now is to sleep. That feeling inundated my heart. I am certain my parents will be proud. In the shadows of a distant past, when the whispers of the gods still shaped the earth and sky, emerged a figure whose destiny intertwined with the threads of time. On that very day, in the resplendent city of Uruk, cradle of civilization and wonders, a child was born whose resonance would echo through the eternity, Gilgamesh. His birth was marked by the conjunction of cosmic forces, heralding the arrival of a being destined to alter the course of intertwined fates between gods and mortals. From his earliest moments, Gilgamesh's presence exuded an undeniable magnetism. With a curious gaze seemingly encompassing the entire cosmos, his eyes were windows to a restless soul, eager to unveil the mysteries of the world around him and pioneer advancements in the technology of his age that would revolutionize the future. Raised under the loving care of his mother, Ninsun, a wise and virtuous woman, Gilgamesh grew with an innate sense of purpose and responsibility. Ninsun regarded him with admiration, seeing in him a seed of greatness that, if nurtured properly, could blossom into a tree offering shade and fruit to her realm. Gilgamesh's exceptional qualities became evident in his childhood. He possessed a supernatural strength and agility that set him apart from children his age, an intelligence rivaling even the most astute adults in the kingdom. Each of his movements was imbued with a grace and skill defying the laws of physics themselves. As he matured, his fame spread throughout Uruk, turning him into a figure of admiration and apprehension for where his curiosity might one day lead him to invent. However, these extraordinary abilities were also interwoven with an insatiable thirst for challenges and excesses. Gilgamesh was known not only for his might but also for his unchecked desires. The greatness he yearned for was shaded by his impulses. He constructed colossal monuments that left all in awe, yet he also indulged in extravagant banquets and gratified his desires without restraint, leaving a trail of admiration and controversy in his wake. He immersed himself in the experience of life, often without consideration for the consequences of his actions. This duality rendered him a complex human being, a reflection of the internal conflicts that afflict all mortals. Yet, within Gilgamesh's heart, there was more than mere impulses. Beneath his imposing and audacious exterior beat a heart that felt empathy for his people. Witnessing the suffering and needs of his populace, he underwent an internal transformation. In that moment, a fervent desire to protect his people surged within him, surpassing his own ego. This desire impelled him to confront his weaknesses and learn to channel his power for a greater purpose. In this quest for purpose and meaning, Gilgamesh encountered Enkidu. This being, born from the heart of nature itself, was his equal and opposite. Enkidu, initially a wild and bestial man living in communion with animals, was fashioned by the gods to confront Gilgamesh and challenge his dominion. They crossed paths before the temple of Uruk, and they engaged in a fierce battle that lasted several days. Gilgamesh was incensed that a lump of clay stood equal to him, feeling humiliated at having to use his most cherished treasures at the outset of the battle. However, he soon began to relish the fight and wielded his weapons without remorse for their use. After a fierce battle that left them both exhausted, each warrior collapsed onto the ground, paying no heed to their location. Gilgamesh did so while laughing, remarking that there couldn't be a winner without two corpses, and Enkidu fell mirroring him, like a mirror. Commending each other's valor, they became unparalleled friends who continued to have numerous adventures. One of Enkidu's notable achievements during that time was getting Gilgamesh to use his treasures in combat. Together, they combined their strength to defeat the guardian of the forest and the beast of the gods, Humbaba, for the purpose of protecting Uruk rather than dealing with the deities. Enkidu remarked that people were suffering under their actions, prompting them to question the point of such actions. Eventually, Enkidu came to understand Gilgamesh's path, realizing that as a king, he would look out for humanity's future through his solidarity. Through his friendship with Enkidu, Gilgamesh learned humility and connection to the earth. Enkidu became his companion and counterpart, challenging him to see beyond his own reflection and to connect with the deepest truths of the world. Together, they embarked on journeys and faced challenges that would be etched into history, learning from one another and forging a bond that transcended physical strength and delved into the depths of their souls. Thus, the first phase of Gilgamesh's life was woven with threads of desire, mistakes, and friendship. His personality, shaped by his own passions and the influences of those around him, began to evolve. The seed of greatness that Ninsen had perceived at his birth was beginning to sprout, still immature but promising. In the dawn of his life, Gilgamesh was already on the path to becoming a being whose legacy would transcend generations and even challenge the gods themselves. But everything changed one day when a shadow of illness fell upon Enkidu. Nature itself, which had been his companion and refuge, now seemed to turn against him. The vitality that had characterized him began to fade, leaving Gilgamesh dumbfounded and filled with impotence in the face of the situation. The two friends fought against the disease consuming Enkidu's body together, seeking in vain for a cure in the farthest reaches of the land they had explored. As Enkidu lay on his sickbed, his gaze turned to the vast expanses of the nature he loved. Through his open windows, he could feel the wind whispering ancient secrets and see the trees that had been his confidants. As his strength waned, his connection to the earth seemed to intensify, as if his spirit was merging with the very essence of the world around him. Gilgamesh remained at his side, powerless in the face of the inevitability of death. His eyes, once filled with courage and arrogance, were now brimming with tears. The helplessness of not being able to save his dearest friend weighed on him like a heavy stone. They had shared everything, from victories on the battlefield to moments of profound reflection, and now they stood on the threshold of a farewell that not even the fiercest courage could forestall. Enkidu, still clinging to life, found the strength to speak in his weakened voice. He gazed at Gilgamesh with eyes full of gratitude and love, his words resonating with the wisdom he had gained on their journeys together. "Who will understand you after I'm gone? Who else will walk by your side? My friend. When I think that you will live on alone from here on, I cannot help but weep." His words were a final gift of teaching and solace, meant to guide Gilgamesh onto his rightful path beyond all selfish desires. Enkidu's light began to fade slowly, like the sun setting on the horizon. His breathing grew calmer, and his body, once so strong and vigorous, began to relax. Gilgamesh held his friend's hand, clinging to this last connection they shared. In Enkidu's final moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, as if even nature felt the loss of this being so integral to its essence. When the last breath of life left Enkidu's body, a sense of silence and serenity enveloped the surroundings. Gilgamesh found himself alone with the memories of the moments they had shared, the laughter and tears that had woven the fabric of their friendship. He sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the loss but also the gift of wisdom that Enkidu had bequeathed to him. Enkidu's death did not mark the end of his influence. In every whisper of the wind, in every falling leaf, in every sunrise and sunset, Enkidu's spirit would live on eternally. But a hatred welled up in Gilgamesh's heart as he thought of the gods who had caused him so much trouble. The years that followed were somewhat uneasy for all, for something was on the horizon, and everyone could feel it. The winds of change blew through Uruk, carrying with them a foreboding of cosmic upheaval. The relationship between gods and humans, once in balance, began to teeter under the weight of divine oppression. The gods, blinded by their own power and desire for dominance, had forgotten the original purpose of their existence, to protect and guide humanity. Injustice and suffering spread like poisonous weeds in fertile soil. In the heart of this tempest, a leader emerged, bearing in his spirit the echo of past generations and the cry of generations yet to come. That was Gilgamesh, the valiant and impassioned king who had battled his own demons and learned the value of empathy and humanity. His gaze, a mixture of arrogance and melancholy, fixed upon the horizon. He knew that the cosmic balance was askew and that he, along with his people, must raise their voices in defense of their freedom and dignity. The rebellion began as a murmur, a seed of discontent that took root in the heart of every person in Uruk. The gods, in their arrogance, had started to use humans as pawns in their divine game. Their whims and decrees were law, and humans suffered under the yoke of their oppression. But the seed of desire for freedom and justice held firm, growing as more and more people realized they could no longer remain subdued. Gilgamesh became the beacon that would guide the uprising. The flame of rebellion burned in his eyes, and his voice carried the promise of a world where humans would be free to forge their own destinies without relying on selfish gods. The city of Uruk became the epicenter of the rebellion, a place where minds and hearts united in the struggle for justice and equality. The outcry reached the heavens, and the gods were confronted by a humanity that had awakened from its slumber. The gods reacted with fury, sending storms and earthquakes to quell the nascent rebellion. But human hearts were unbreakable, fueled by the conviction that they deserved more than to be mere puppets in the gods' game. Gilgamesh, along with brave leaders who had risen from the people, strategized and united the human forces under a common cause. The struggle was titanic, a battle between divine power and human will. The gods unleashed lightning and storms, trying to smother the rebellion in its infancy. But humans clung to hope like a shield, fighting for a world where justice and freedom were more than hollow words from ancient deities. Each battle was a reminder of the tenacity of the human spirit and its ability to defy the most crushing adversities. Gilgamesh became the throbbing heart of the rebellion. His sword, an extension of his will, gleamed with the promise of a better future. He inspired the men and women by his side with his unwavering bravery and tireless conviction. In every clash, in every trench, he reminded his comrades of the reason they fought, the right to live under human rules and to live without the yoke of the gods. The struggle reached its zenith in an epic battle that would resonate in the annals of history. Humans faced the gods in a confrontation that shook the very foundations of the world. On the battlefield, Gilgamesh confronted the last apostle of the gods with the same passion and courage he had shown at every step of his journey. His sword rose like a symbol that humans could shape their own rules. In a fierce showdown, Gilgamesh and the humans defied divine powers. With every blow, they recalled the human flaws and desires that had shaped them. The battle was a whirlwind of action and emotion, a clash of forces that mirrored the internal struggle of every human being for their own dignity and purpose in the world. Finally, in a triumphant moment that resounded like thunder, Gilgamesh struck down the divine presence with a final blow. The earth seemed to tremble in acknowledgement of human achievement. The gods had been challenged and overcome by the united strength of mortals who had risen in defense of their freedom. However, victory came at a price. Gilgamesh, exhausted and wounded from the battle, found himself alone on the battlefield where he had confronted the gods. The victory had a bittersweet taste, tainted by the loss of countless human lives in the struggle for freedom. The land was marked by the aftermath of the battle, but also by the promise of a future where humans would be the masters of their destinies. As the sun set on the horizon, Gilgamesh stood as a bridge between two worlds, a being who had embraced his human impulses and errors to challenge the gods and protect his people. The humans' rebellion against the gods would become a tale that transcended time, an epic of courage, friendship, and humanity's eternal longing for justice and freedom. Exhausted and wounded, Gilgamesh collapsed, his breath faltering. Silence spread across the battlefield and eventually throughout the world, even the wind howled amid sobs. In the twilight of his life, he found peace, knowing he had fulfilled his purpose and led his people to freedom without any god stepping foot in the human world as if they owed their existence to them. And so, the legendary Gilgamesh closed his eyes for the last time, his legacy engraved in the hearts of the men and women who had fought alongside him. The man who was never a god, yet had the strength to overcome them all. A simple human who was hailed as the Emperor of Humanity, the King of Heroes, Gilgamesh. Chapter 2, Live as a Human or Dream to be a God. In the shadowy corner of what appeared to be an inn, in a room with weathered wooden walls that seemed frozen in time, the gnarled beams and roughly carved walls painted a picture of poverty and wear. The daylight filtered through small slits in the wooden shutters, creating a play of light and shadows that danced upon the room's walls like magical spirits whispering of something enchanting that had occurred. At the center of the room, a solid wooden bed lay under a worn linen blanket. Yet, it was the bed itself that drew attention, tainted with crimson stains that marred its purity. Upon that bed, stained by what seemed to be blood, lay a child of barely 10 years, their body motionless but their appearance striking. Their golden hair, like a halo of light, framed their head like a blazing flame. The child's face, pale as the full moon, contrasted with the intensity of their golden locks. Their slightly parted lips seemed to murmur forgotten dreams of different worlds, while their small and delicate hands rested upon the blood-streaked quilt that had already dried. The child's body was decently dressed, though the crimson mark on their chest disturbed the tranquility of their image. The room, with its medieval air, seemed to hold its breath, as if time itself had halted its march to observe this child in their eternal repose. And when that child opened their eyes, they revealed a crimson hue that seemed to shine with intensity. Where am I? Were the first words that escaped the young one's lips as they attempted to focus their gaze on the wooden ceiling of an unfamiliar room. The last thing they remember is dying after the battle they had against the gods, something they now consider an act befitting any human life. In that battle, very few could harm them, and their death was merely described as entirely mortal. I smell blood, could that be my blood? The sticky sensation on the child's body grew increasingly uncomfortable, and their hands lifted to cover their eyes, a look of surprise flashing in their gaze. Am I a child again? There was no sensation of pain in their body, nor discomfort, for their awareness had settled into the immature body that now belonged to them. Clearly, they hadn't arrived at this place by mere coincidence, just like the last time. The blood on their body had to belong solely to their body, but the strangeness of it all was that there wasn't a single open wound. Perhaps someone had healed them after injuring them, and that meant they were not in a safe place now. With these concerns in mind, the child struggled to get up from the bed and, still dizzy, made their way to the window of their room. There was nothing out of the ordinary normal people walking civilly at this time of day. The medieval touch was quite evident. The way people dressed and how they carried swords at their hips. Along these cobblestone streets, the facades of houses leaned toward each other, creating a sort of architectural embrace that provided shade and a sense of proximity. The windows were small, framed with carved wood or hewn stone, allowing only glimpses of the bustling life within. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with chimney smoke and the sweetness of dried herbs hanging from doorways. The clinking of blacksmiths and the chants of wandering vendors filled the air, creating a unique symphony that enveloped every corner. Prince Gilgamesh. Has anyone seen Prince Gilgamesh? That's my name, yes, the very name of my previous life. Gilgamesh let out a faint sigh and stepped away from the window to avoid being seen. As he had heard, he was a prince, and it seemed they were looking for him. Despite this, he remembered nothing more than his name and where he came from in this life. It was evident that this world was not his own, as the setting was different and here appeared to be a place far less advanced than his own kingdom. With this in mind, it seemed he had reincarnated, and the body he had taken as his own had serious enemies, considering he had been killed in this room. How did he arrive at this conclusion so easily? It was simple, this method of reincarnation was within the purview of deities entering the human world, taking bodies that were injured or dead minutes before they took their place. He wasn't foolish, but he knew that if the previous owner of the body he had taken was dead, the circumstances of their death should be questioned before it was too late. My powers haven't returned yet, and my connection to my treasure continues to strengthen. It would be foolish to waste the glory of being a prince of a kingdom that could be mine if it's splendid enough. Gilgamesh's words were arrogant, a result of his unique personality acquired through his previous experiences. Having made a decision, he opened the door to the room and saw numerous corpses on the floor. Judging by their clothing, they were likely the ones who had kept him in this place, following the orders of someone who wanted to kill him. This will do for now. Gilgamesh held a steel sword in the hands of one of the corpses. Indifferently, his bare feet stepped on the cold blood as he walked downstairs using the wooden stairs. With a calm stride, Gilgamesh moved through the grim scene of the massacre. The bodies lay scattered as if they were mere trash, their worth reduced to nothing, all of them wearing expressions defined solely by disbelief. They were killed by someone they knew, possibly the same one who ordered them to eliminate me, Gilgamesh murmured as he examined the wounds on the bodies strewn across the floor. The poison coursing through the victims' veins had twisted their faces in agony, a grim testament to the lethality of the poison that had been used. Without any hint of emotion, Gilgamesh's cold eyes rested upon the lifeless forms, his countenance undisturbed as he crossed the field of death with an indifference that seemed carved in stone, a manifestation of his experiences from past lives. You are not worthy of living in my kingdom, you died like the trash you are. Gilgamesh's bare feet moved through the blood and slid across the corpses without issue, as if death itself was not worthy of disturbing his emotions. The shadows of the fallen bodies became his silent carpet as he advanced towards the inn's door. The creaking wooden threshold bore his weight, marking his departure from this unfamiliar world. Outside the inn, the sound of horse hooves echoed rapidly through the cobblestone streets as they searched for Gilgamesh, who was nonchalantly exiting the inn. As Gilgamesh opened the door, the strong sun caused him to narrow his eyes slightly, and the knights outside who were eagerly searching for the missing prince turned their gazes toward the door's creak. Prince Gilgamesh. The prince has been found, quickly, call the doctor to examine him immediately. The knights rushed toward where Gilgamesh had appeared, and one quickly bent to one knee and asked, "My prince, are you well? There is nothing in this world that can harm me. So, Sir Knight, thoroughly inspect the inn and find the culprits who made me soil my feet and hands with their blood." Gilgamesh extended his hand, holding the heavy sword. When the knights saw this action, a sense of death filled their souls, and their bodies froze in terror. They, the royal knights of the Kingdom of Uruk, were immobilized by a simple movement from Prince Gilgamesh. What is happening? Gilgamesh locked eyes with the first knight, who held the sword with rigid movements. I want to go home, I've had enough of wasting my precious time here. Why yes, Prince Gilgamesh. Where is the carriage? Chapter 3, The Rumors of the Fourth Prince. My prince. For the love of heavens, are you all right? A man in armor and a cloak covering his back asked. Gilgamesh didn't give him a glance but walked straight towards the waiting carriage ahead. Where was my royal guard, and how did I end up in this pigsty with swine? I, Simon, deserve death for failing to protect you," said Simon, Gilgamesh's royal guard. He was astonished. He had never seen the prince wield a sword, let alone train, yet it seemed like he had come out of an infernal battlefield. There are 20 corpses, all seeming to be useless thieves, and there's no clue that could tell us who did this. A royal guard approached Simon and informed him of their findings. That's curious, it seems like whoever sent me to kill has some influence over the royal guards. After seeing the source of the voice, Simon watched as the prince boarded the carriage and quickly joined him. Today, Gilgamesh was different, as if his entire character and presence had changed drastically. Gilgamesh Azura, that demon is frightening just to look at, said a royal guard with a distorted expression. Who hasn't heard the rumors about that prince? Nobody knows if he's skilled in magic, if he's wielded a sword, or how intelligent he might be, which is why they call him the sleeping demon. They say that when he was born, a golden blanket covered him, as if he were the son of heaven and lord of men. It's a shame that his older brothers and even his sister have the hereditary position. Many believe Gilgamesh would make a better monarch. If anyone from Grabble's faction hears you, your head will be on a pike by tomorrow morning. Let's get to work, all these corpses must be in the carriage before the rumors spread. But another knight intervened, speaking in a hushed voice so others couldn't hear. Could it be that the prince killed all these bandits? Haha! If the fourth prince at the age of 10 managed to take down 20 grown men, I'll cut off my own head. It's foolish to think a child could achieve that without receiving a single wound, said a knight with a wavering expression. He had seen Prince Gilgamesh and merely looking into his eyes was terrifying. In the carriage, Gilgamesh looked at the streets of this city with a furrowed brow and asked Simon directly, "Did someone from my family do this?" "Prince, you can't ask such questions so openly." Simon didn't know how to respond to Gilgamesh, this prince who wasn't supported by any noble family. The main factions to succeed the throne were his first brother Grabble, his second brother Halfaus, and his sister, Princess Ariel. Simon was right, but Gilgamesh didn't care at all. Nor did he care about what happened before he took over this body as his own. All that mattered now was seeing what there was to see in this world, so new yet strangely familiar. This kingdom didn't matter to him, nor did the succession of the throne. He had ruled as a king before, and that was enough for him. What he wanted now was to travel, maybe find 1 or 2 wives who piqued his interest and deserved his love. After setting aside immortality, he should focus on achieving goals he had never accomplished before. Yes, in this life, he would focus on exploration. I have difficulty keeping focused, so I don't want to waste time on trivialities. Gilgamesh looked at Simon. This knight should be of a decent level to start training. But for now, he needed to learn where he was and what kingdom he was a prince of. They soon reached the top of a hill where a majestic castle stood, the Silver Palace, as described by Simon. Surrounding the palace were enormous mansions belonging to the high nobles. Boulevards extended beyond the city's surrounding walls. As he understood it, he would be staying in this place for some time until he regained his powers. Gilgamesh! A woman shouted and quickly made her way to the carriage's door. Princess Ariel, the fourth prince asked for rest in his chamber as he's still feeling a bit dizzy. Simon, who saw the princess approach Gilgamesh, intervened immediately as he had been instructed. Are you all right, brother? Ariel didn't care about the words of a knight, she just wanted to know if her brother was well. You're a princess, behave like one, or people behind your back will think you're weak. Gilgamesh looked into Princess Ariel's eyes and told her, furthermore, I'm fine. From today onwards, there's nothing in the world that can think of killing me. Leaving those words behind, Gilgamesh walked forward and said, lead the way, Simon. Yes, Prince. Simon regained his composure and followed. Ariel looked at her brother Gilgamesh, the boy who used to show her his new swords with an innocent smile. Now her brother had changed, she didn't know if Grabble's faction had wanted to get rid of her younger brother, but she would find out. Do they still not know who kidnapped Prince Gilgamesh? Ariel asked in a cold tone, letting go of her noble composure. Her servant said in a doubtful tone, Princess Ariel, the reports say it was a group of bandits identified in the search and capture reports. They were all killed by a violent and deadly poison, so there's no evidence. Ariel furrowed her brow, her usually adorable gaze was now shrouded in coldness. She had never imagined that the factions of the princes would make a move against her younger brother Gilgamesh, who had no support to become king. The factions of my brothers have crossed the line. They know perfectly well that Gilgamesh is not supported by any family, let alone have a chance to become a rival to them. Those filthy dogs will pay for this with their wretched lives. Ariel's servant quickly said, Princess Ariel, regain your composure. First, we should be thankful that the fourth prince survived. It's not good for you to lose control in that manner, it could lead to problems. Ariel nodded as she regained her calm demeanor. To be honest, she had lost her composure, and that wasn't something that should happen if she wanted to appear in control. This way, at least she wouldn't appear weak, as her little and adorable brother mentioned. Chapter 4, Surroundings of Nobility. Azura Kingdom, capital Ars, Silver Palace. It was a chilly night. Gilgamesh sat on the balcony of his room, sipping on hot tea. Though he would have preferred a fine wine from his special cellar, he was but a child, and the alcohol his young body could handle did not currently satisfy his desires. It has already been a week. Gilgamesh mused, taking a sip of black tea. The memories of this body were never granted to him, so he had to learn everything from scratch. It turns out he is the prince of the Azura Kingdom and is in the third position in line for the throne of this realm, considering only his brothers. If his sister entered the line of succession, she would be second, leaving him in the fourth position. As he had researched, the Azura Kingdom is a human realm with the largest national power in the world, located in the western area of the central continent. It is one of the most abundant and prosperous regions globally, thus, becoming the king of the Azura Kingdom is equivalent to becoming the richest person in the world. However, none of this mattered to Gilgamesh, as both the nobles and many of the inhabitants of this kingdom were worse than scum. None of them deserved to have him as their monarch, and he had no interest in taking the throne from the man who was now his father. Despite the abundant resources found in this region and the relatively few monsters that appear in the vicinity, which makes the Azura Kingdom flourish with its people, Gilgamesh held his previous reign in high regard, and only a few individuals were worthy of living in his realm if it still existed. In this capital of the Azura Kingdom, named Ars in honor of a hero who led his comrades to victory in the first great human-demon war, it was also the largest city in the world. The headquarters of the water god sword style could be found here, where knights trained. Ars also boasted a massive colosseum, a beautiful knight training ground, exquisite temples for the Saint Meles religion, an aqueduct system that spanned the entire city, and the headquarters of the world's largest commercial enterprises. However, even though it was the largest city in the world, it was a challenging place for adventurers to make a living. This was due to the fact that knights were regularly dispatched to exterminate monsters in villages and towns, leading to very few extermination missions being organized. In its vicinity lies the Fido region. The Boreas Grere family governs that region and is famous as the land of perfume. Gilgamesh mused, stirring his teacup with great interest. As for the Nodos family, it's famous for being considered the land of alcohol. I hope their praises are worthy. Gilgamesh had developed a strong desire for wines, which is why he had collected hundreds of thousands of bottles of the finest quality according to his taste. But he had heard from his recently hired history teacher that most of the wine consumed in celebrations was produced in Milbits. I'll end up with the Donati and Wishari families, neither of them really interests me. Gilgamesh then looked at the names he had written down on a sheet, and these were his brothers, the princes of the Azura kingdom. What a bunch of misfortunes, none of them is worthy of becoming a monarch, but considering the state of this kingdom, I didn't expect any less. Gilgamesh shook his head, left the balcony of his room, and went straight to bed. He was slowly getting accustomed to the rules and power divisions in this world. He had heard interesting things, so he just had to wait until he regained some of his powers. The next morning. Boom! 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 The wind blew as Gilgamesh struck a woolen dummy over and over again. His wooden sword moved swiftly, and the strength hidden in each of his attacks was highly abnormal. Next to him were some broken wooden swords and pieces of training dummies on the ground. All of this demonstrated how hard Gilgamesh had been working to sharpen his senses and gain better control of his body. The first in the line of succession is your brother, Prince Grabbles of Azura, who will ascend to the throne if the succession line is considered. His desire to claim the throne is great, and he is very skilled in politics. A middle-aged man in neat and high-quality attire stood beside Gilgamesh, who was vigorously swinging his wooden sword. The history teacher and advisor looked at the young prince and broke into a cold sweat after getting a closer look at his character. You may continue. Gilgamesh said without even glancing at the elderly man. The second in the line of succession is your sister, Princess Ariel and Azura. She hasn't shown her desire to rule, but she's the second most supported after your elder brother, the first prince, and she's your father's only daughter. As for your second brother, Halfaus, he is the third in the line of succession and possibly has the most support from the noble families of the realm. All of this information, of course, comes from personal research I have conducted over the past few years. Standing beside the elderly man was Simon, who stood like an unmoving structure. He had curly, unusual hair and wore a robe over his silver armor. His eyes were fixed on Prince Gilgamesh's swordplay. How had his prince become so fierce with his sword? As for the alliances supporting your two elder brothers. Before the teacher could finish his words, Gilgamesh swung his sword, shattering the woolen dummy into 1,000 pieces. Boom! Since the incident at the inn, my two brothers haven't shown up to check on my condition. Of course, they must have heard the results without coming here, but that's rather suspicious, Gilgamesh said in a disdainful tone, accompanied by an ironic smile. Prince, please mind your words. Simon said, a little worried about the repercussions Gilgamesh's words might cause. This knight worries too much about nothing. I suppose it's because he has no idea how far I can go if I set my mind to it. But that's a boring idea. I've already ruled what I had to rule, so being a king in my new life is not up for discussion. Prince, you've been training intensively for 2 hours, I recommend you take a break. However, no matter how much fear Simon felt toward the current Prince Gilgamesh, his job was to protect him, and he didn't want to fail again. You're right. Looking at his hand, which was rapidly healing, Gilgamesh agreed. He had been maintaining this training pace to adapt to the size of his body, and it must be said that it was more challenging than he had imagined. May I continue? The teacher hesitated about what to do after his narrative was interrupted. Gilgamesh frowned, feeling a pair of eyes staring at him through the window. He walked slowly to the wooden sword rack, took one in his right hand, and approached the window. You're quite far away, but if you let your guard down, you'll die. Having said this, Gilgamesh launched his sword at a terrifying speed. The disturbance of the wind caused the window curtains to flutter, and books along with empty teacups flew to the sides. This is... The teacher had a pale expression. What was happening with Prince Gilgamesh? Is there something I should know? Simon asked, genuinely confused. Gilgamesh's attitude was very difficult to predict, so whenever he didn't understand something about what he was doing, he would ask directly. Not at all, it was a bat that seemed to be rabid. I just scared it away as it could infect someone with its disease. Gilgamesh waved his hands and looked at the teacher, who appeared to be paralyzed. You can continue, pay no mind to my demeanor. Oh, yes, I'll continue. The teacher adjusted his tone and said, those are your two brothers and sister who are in the line of succession, so you, being the third of your siblings, would make you fourth in line. After hearing the introduction the teacher had prepared per his request, Gilgamesh displayed a satisfied smile. This realm was as decadent as any other, with princes and a princess engaged in an intense battle to claim their father's throne while factions sought a foothold for future gain. As he correctly understood, he was the youngest of the princes, so the factions supporting those who aimed to become rulers did not see him as a potential threat. He was indeed an obstacle, but no one knew him well enough to reach such a conclusion. However, the blatant assassination attempt against him must have been orchestrated by someone from his siblings' faction. As for who the culprit was, as long as they didn't trouble him further, Gilgamesh would let the matter go for his peace of mind. While still debating what to do, Gilgamesh realized he had an easy path to do as he pleased. After seeing for himself what this kingdom had to offer, he would begin visiting other historically curious places. Chapter 5, Magic and Swords. Regarding magic. The teacher wanted to start his explanation on magic when he was abruptly interrupted by Gilgamesh. That's enough for today. Tomorrow, I'll start with my magic class if I feel like it. After my sword training, Gilgamesh said as he turned to Simon and instructed, inform the royal knights in training that I'll visit them tomorrow. They'll be my warm-up rivals, and I'll test what the future royal guard is made of. Yes, my prince. I'll convey your message. Simon had learned one thing, and that's why he remained Gilgamesh's knight. He couldn't contradict or underestimate the prince's abilities under any circumstances, or he knew he would lose more than just his head. He was unaware of what kind of experience Gilgamesh had during his abduction, but to come out unscathed and without any psychological issues, he was definitely a demon that no one had the slightest inkling of. Very well, then you both may leave. Then we shall take our leave. You can ask me anything at any time as long as you inform any guard in the vicinity that you are looking for me. Simon bowed, and he and the teacher left the room. Once they were gone, Gilgamesh snapped his fingers, and a golden ripple materialized in the air. Without any surprise, he reached his hand into the shimmering space and pulled out a ring with a pearl embedded in it. This ring was anything but normal. By possessing it, the user could see hundreds of meters without the need for a telescope. Undoubtedly, a magical item that would be very useful to Gilgamesh, as he found it tiresome and irritating to exert more effort than necessary to solve the problems he was being dragged into. I suppose I'll have to pay my brothers a visit, because if they don't ease up on their surveillance around me, I'll have to make one of them disappear without a trace. If someone were to hear Gilgamesh's words, they would undoubtedly think he was lying or it was a simple joke made by an immature child. However, someone experienced in life and with superior power would take Gilgamesh's words as a warning of his future actions. For Gilgamesh, it was easy to solve these problems. It simply involved killing one of his brothers, and that would be the most troublesome of the two, not considering his sister. With that, the remaining brother would take the lead directly, and if everything went well, they would stop bothering him. If not, he would use vicious methods to frame the remaining brother and make him take the blame for the murder. Of course, in Gilgamesh's eyes, this was something he would never waste time on because his thoughts and desires were directed elsewhere. This world is undoubtedly vast, and I must explore it. Who knows? Perhaps I can find hidden gems among all this trash. A few hours later, he set out to learn about languages, which was quite annoying for him. However, with high proficiency, he took a few hours to master the basics of each language. Sigh. Finally, Gilgamesh could take a deep breath and take a moment to rest. He then reclined on his gigantic bed once again. After conversing with Simon, reading books and learning from what the history teacher had said, he knew he was on the human continent, also known as the Central Continent. The Central Continent is divided into three parts by the Red Dragon Ridge. The impoverished and war-torn areas to the north, the Asura Kingdom to the west, one of the most abundant and prosperous regions in the world, and various large countries constantly vying for power and rebelling in the southern area. The human race constitutes the majority of the population, which is why Gilgamesh referred to it as the human continent. What lies beyond the Central Continent? The Demon Continent, a place impoverished with powerful monsters. There are demon lords ruling in various places as kings in their respective realms. The demon race makes up the majority of the population. A place that was poor and lacked Gilgamesh's interest, but on the other hand, there was the Meles continent. In the north is the Great Forest, and in the south is the sacred kingdom of Meles. Dividing these two regions is the Blue Dragon Ridge, with the Holy Sword Road running through it from top to bottom without a single monster on the road. The population is approximately half human race and beast race. Leaving aside the Beggarito continent, which Gilgamesh ignored, he learned that there is a place called the Sky Continent. A flat terrain at 3,000 meters above sea level. The place where the celestial race lives. How celestial can a race be to call themselves that? Gilgamesh felt a bit disdainful toward this race, but he considered it something from which he could gain much more than from the others. Perhaps, for example, a celestial wine. However, in order to act freely, he needed to investigate more about what was happening with his powers and what were the main weaknesses he should consider to fully recover his combat capabilities. First, Gilgamesh decided to simulate in his mind what he could do so far. Shortly after thinking about it, he appeared in what seemed to be a vast golden land and soon felt his current powers. As far as his physical strength was concerned, it had recovered by 30%, considering that his powers were still shaping his small body. His magic, on the other hand, had a considerable reserve, but compared to the humans in this place, it was a bit weaker, as it was a trait he hadn't paid much attention to before. Regarding his divine power, he had access to it but in very small amounts since there were no gods who had created him in this place. With no gods to communicate with, he couldn't obtain more than divine energy and thereby have another reliable source of power. Shall we go a bit deeper? Gilgamesh had much greater powers, which gave him abilities such as levitation or flight, heat emission, and rapid recovery after a battle. His endurance, on the other hand, was limitless, allowing him to train for 3 hours straight without getting tired virtually. In this world, there was no one who could have at least this ability, and that gave Gilgamesh a superior status comparable to that of the gods. After all, he had eliminated them on Earth with his abilities at their peak. After a week, his initial concerns about not having full access to his powers had caused him some frustration. However, now that he could summon any of his treasures, like Inkiju or Ea, which had accompanied him in this world, and what he liked most was having his golden armor intact. Fortunately, everything was intact, and it was just a matter of time before he regained all his power as he grew and adapted his new body to his divinity. So, any gods or strong enemies in this world did not fall within his immediate concern, as a battle against them would inevitably happen eventually. The rankings of swordsmen in this world are very annoying, something that only exists to satisfy the egos of the strongest and create a clear division to look down on those who aren't officially evaluated, Gilgamesh mused as he toyed with an extremely precious dagger in his hands. I should gain some fame so that the insects stop buzzing around me. In addition to that, Gilgamesh, who seemed much more passive than usual, thought about what he could do and murmured, I could certainly gather all the treasures of this world. That could be a fun goal. Although he had collected the treasures of his previous world, the need to keep doing so gave him an exciting tingling in his stomach. The Gate of Babylon, where he kept all his most precious treasures, had accompanied him in this life, making his ambitions smaller. He had everything, practically in the last war he had participated in, he had taken countless weapons, and they all were in the Gate of Babylon. He had legendary sheep, weapons that could destroy the largest city in this world, and spears that could pierce even gods. With this, the new enemies who might direct their attacks toward him would become child's play. Every passing hour, his super strength and speed continued to increase. If compared to swordsman's strength, he could now easily, without using his divine weapons, have the strength surpassing that of a sword king, although his proficiency with other weapons might be lower. After all, he wasn't known for being a master with every weapon in his treasury, his power relied on the powerful weapons he had collected throughout his life. That's why even if he set his mind to it, in his current state, he could defeat any enemy below a god. As he understood it, there was a dragon god walking in the world, and if he ever got bored, maybe he could pay a visit and test the gods of this new world. But back to the main topic, Gilgamesh was very powerful. So much so that he didn't know what to do in this world. There was nothing that could drive him to achieve brilliant goals, let alone toil to reach the pinnacle in this world and see how far the strongest could go in this new world. Chapter 6, The Enigmas of Life. Early the next morning, Gilgamesh woke up, and after a morning workout to further improve his physical skills, he was ready to visit the knight's training ground. But before that, he needed suitable clothing, not those supposedly high-quality garments and jewels that had no value in his eyes. As a personal preference, he chose the most advanced and fashionable attire in this world. However, it still didn't quite meet his discerning tastes, so he made some modifications to his outfit and smiled when he was satisfied. Among all the clothes they brought, this one is better. What do you think, my lady? Gilgamesh looked at himself in the mirror, and a servant standing nearby, who happened to be human, trembled a bit at his question. That style of clothing befits your great features, prince. The family servant replied with a slight bow before stepping aside. The servant's response, of course, satisfied Gilgamesh, who, after wearing a necklace with golden fangs and 2 matching bracelets on his wrists, looked at himself in the mirror once more. In addition to that, his ensemble consisted of a white long-sleeved shirt and black pants, accompanied by a matching belt and discreet boots to complete the outfit. The body jewelry complemented his hair and eye color, giving him a truly desirable appearance. His life since waking up in this world had been very busy. More than once, he had tried to take a break and let things unfold as they may, but that didn't last long. Living without purpose was something he despised in people, and he would not become one of them. "Hello, Prince Gilgamesh." Gilgamesh looked up, greeted Simon in front of him, and smiled. "Is everything ready?" "Without any problems, we can set off whenever you wish." Simon, in his characteristic heavy and bulky armor, walked behind Gilgamesh as they headed toward the carriage. Judging by his appearance, he should be around 30 years old at most. A long sword and a short sword hung quietly on both sides of his waist, and the sharpness of their edges indicated that they were high-quality blades. From his appearance, he should be among the mid-tier warriors on the knight's power scale. As Gilgamesh walked towards the carriage, he picked up a small stick from one of the bushes, all the while being observed by Simon. With Gilgamesh's recent changes, his true personality had clearly been revealed without any restraint. Simon had seen him only a few times, as he always remained locked in his room either reading or training silently, which he had only recently discovered as his routines had become more active. At first, Simon thought Gilgamesh was a complete useless individual, far removed from all the rumors and mysterious movements surrounding him. But that image disappeared after witnessing the strength and training he went through every time he saw him. If everything continued without any issues, Simon was certain that Gilgamesh would become one of the strongest in the new generation. That's why he remained steadfast, following every one of his orders, no matter what they entailed. He knew that his future would be influenced by the prince he had chosen to protect, and he would press on regardless of the consequences. As a powerful knight who had risen to the position of guarding one of the princes of the Azura kingdom, Simon had a unique ability: he could see a person's talent with just a glance. Yet, in all his years of experience, it was rare to witness someone grow so strong in such a short span of time. Previously, from his past conversations with Gilgamesh, Simon could sense that the young prince wasn't humble or tyrannical. He was arrogantly confident and always carried a trace of humanity in his actions. Simon had heard from Princess Ariel that, although the young prince had never displayed his talents, he had the potential to be as powerful as he set his mind to be. Judging by this, something in Gilgamesh's childhood had affected him in such a way that he didn't stand out much in recent years. "I've heard that the Water God style is one of the 3 main sword schools in the capital," Gilgamesh said with a difficult-to-describe smile. "That's correct, Prince. The Water God style is a sword art that specializes in defensive techniques, emphasizing parrying and counterattacking oncoming strikes. As there are only a few attacking forms, there's also the art of provocation to make the opponent take the initiative," Simon immediately responded, based on his own knowledge, as it was a style he had dedicated himself to perfecting. "Isn't that quite dull?" Simon's expression tightened slightly, and he didn't respond immediately. "What do you mean, Prince?" "I mean, isn't that fighting style just about waiting from the rear and attacking only when you're attacked? In that case, you'll never take the initiative against other fighting styles, so naturally, when you want to defeat your enemy, taking the initiative would severely weaken your skills." Gilgamesh believed that this fighting style was very inefficient because it was limited to one type of use, and everything depended on who the attackers were. Simon understood Gilgamesh's point, so he responded promptly, "It's a defensive fighting style, perfect for protecting those we wish to safeguard." "Well, that doesn't change things. I just hope to find an interesting rival, wasting my time this way would be quite irritating," Gilgamesh said as he boarded the carriage, followed by Simon. After some time, the carriage stopped at the Water God style fencing school, where the sons of nobles and aspiring knights trained day and night, hoping to become much stronger. This fighting style united those who believed they were part of a group of outstanding talents, when in reality, they were only wasting their time on daydreams destined to be shattered. "Prince Gilgamesh, would you like to accompany me to meet the current head of this academy?" Simon looked to Gilgamesh for a response, but he wasn't entirely focused. "You can go ahead. I'm only here to find a rival who might know at what level I stand," Gilgamesh replied, gazing into the distance at the training grounds and smiling slightly. "Then I'll come to fetch you when everything's ready." Simon didn't notice anything amiss, so he walked towards the academy's central building, leaving Gilgamesh behind, still holding a branch. Full of curiosity about the youngsters at this place, Gilgamesh walked towards the training grounds and observed the training of many who were there, but he quickly lost interest. "I don't know if my expectations were too high or this place is a complete disgrace. No one here is training seriously," Gilgamesh muttered. Just as he was about to leave to find Simon, he was surrounded by a burly guy and several other comrades who had noticed Gilgamesh's presence since he entered the training grounds. The tallest of the bunch, named Arthur, was the first to speak. "Hey, how did you get lost and end up here? You look familiar, have we ever met?" Many others who had been keeping their distance knew that trouble was brewing but decided to stay away, as getting involved would only bring them problems. However, a slender young man in the distance shouted, "Arthur, he's just here to watch the training grounds, so stop bothering him." Arthur's expression hardened, but he knew he couldn't go around intimidating people he crossed paths with. But just as they were about to leave, Gilgamesh smiled and said, "Bothering me? Tell me, do you think I'm afraid of you?" A huge grin spread across Gilgamesh's face as he perfectly understood the intentions of this young man and his group of friends, and he had come to grasp the simple thoughts that this bunch of swine harbored. Chapter 7, A Bit of Fun. What did he say? Aren't you afraid of Arturo? Arturo ignored the glances of the people around him. Instead, he coldly stared at Gilgamesh, who was standing in front of him, looking him in the eyes with a mocking expression. Gilgamesh, as if uninterested in continuing these childish games, said, "A clever dog doesn't block the path of someone who could be its owner. Arturo, if you don't want to be a bad dog, get out of my way right now." After hearing this, the boy who had spoken up to stop the harassment of Gilgamesh knew that everything had gone awry. Especially when he saw the demon-like eyes of Arturo, he knew that this wouldn't end well at all. One of the students who had distanced himself felt slighted by a stranger, as he was a student of the water god style. So he said, "Don't you like this place? The Water God Style Academy has strict rules that dictate that no one unaffiliated with the academy can enter the training grounds. Does a clown like you dare to come to our house and step on us like this?" Gilgamesh was about to respond when a voice stopped him and whispered, "Please, don't cause any more trouble here. Everyone is a bit on edge because the fourth prince will be here to challenge some students to a formal combat. So it's best to put an end to this now." The intention of that student was to remind Gilgamesh that they didn't usually behave this way, and he also insinuated that Gilgamesh couldn't afford to be arrogant here. If he takes the initiative to cause trouble here, the students in this place are allowed to respond with a formal duel. Arturo didn't make any move and said, "You must be from some noble family, but not influential enough to be recognized by anyone else. Even if you're a student from another academy, you're still a guest. We would all like to treat you with the proper courtesy according to our situation. However, you're disrupting our training routine, so you can leave this place quietly if you apologize for your comments. Furthermore, we don't want our things to be stolen or used by others." "What do you mean by stealing?" asked the student who had been speaking up for Gilgamesh until now with a strange expression. "You clearly know that entry to the academy is restricted for certain people, so stop insinuating that someone might steal from this place, as you know it's not the case." Arturo clearly wanted to imply that he didn't like strangers and that Gilgamesh might covet their treasures. This situation didn't affect just one person, as it also greatly influenced the family behind Gilgamesh. Even someone as cunning as Arturo had to understand what his words meant. "You must also know that this academy is not reserved solely for students from noble families but also for commoners who can be sponsored by families. Who can guarantee that etiquette and behavior are well ingrained in someone outside of our academy? If this stranger calls us dogs, that speaks very poorly of his status," Arturo pointed out with a cold voice. After finishing his words, Arturo glared coldly at Gilgamesh. The other members of the nobility smiled and agreed with the words that had been spoken, while others chose not to get involved in this issue that was not their concern. The one speaking up for Gilgamesh was filled with anger, and it seemed that he already had certain issues with Arturo. However, Gilgamesh remained calm, and after a few seconds, he responded calmly. "No treasure in my sight falls into the category of things I care about having. Besides, if I truly like something, I can take it without any of you being able to do anything about it. Steal. You should feel proud to possess something I like, that's how things work if any of you get in my way. And as for all of you," Gilgamesh proclaimed with a deep voice, "you're all so conceited that it disgusts me. I've never seen a living being dare to stand in my way. This place is much more interesting than I imagined. Of course, by recommendation, you should step aside and take a moment to rest. You damn idiot. If you wish to be arrogant, then I'll teach you to respect me by force." Arturo, infuriated by Gilgamesh's words, unsheathed his sword. "Arturo, if you want to fight someone, fight me," said the boy next to Gilgamesh. Having witnessed Gilgamesh's arrogance, he knew that Gilgamesh was not an ordinary person, so he decided to step forward and stop this problem that had escalated to incredible levels. At the same time, he believed that Gilgamesh had never held a sword before, so he took a step forward and assumed a defensive stance. Fury exploded in Arturo's eyes. Being called a dog and having his possessions called trash were things he could not accept under any circumstances. But Gilgamesh in front of him dared to insult him in this manner, so he would give him an unforgettable lesson. Gilgamesh slowly pushed the boy next to him, who seemed ready to fight for him, so he calmly said, "Your name is Arturo, right? I can see those eyes ready to kill, so you must be prepared to die as well." Well. This is excellent." Arturo, who seemed to have heard a joke, burst into laughter. "This is the funniest thing I've ever heard. Can a stranger like you kill someone who is in the advanced standard stage of the water god style, like me? So be it, I'll give you that chance to prove otherwise." Knowing that Gilgamesh was just a stranger who had come to insult them, they knew they could do this, while other students lamented the outcome of this battle. Do you want to fight as an advanced standard practitioner against someone whose strength you don't know? You don't even know who he is. Your arrogance is certainly a testament to the titles Arturo has received. Gilgamesh didn't seem upset, on the contrary, he was being entertained in this way, so he said, "Very well, everyone can bear witness to this battle." After saying this, Gilgamesh headed toward the combat stage. "Listen. This is impossible. Arturo is just steps away from leveling up in swordsmanship. Even if you are here to assess his skills, you won't be able to do anything if you accept a formal duel with so many witnesses. It's okay, he's just an advanced standard practitioner. However, even a sword saint in this place dares to challenge me. Depending on my mood, I might run them through with a sword as well." Gilgamesh pushed the kind-hearted young man who had spoken up for him from the beginning and asked, "By the way, what's your name?" "My name is Lorian, no last name or affiliation other than being a student of this academy." Lorian had recognized Gilgamesh, but since he hadn't introduced himself as the prince, he decided to remain silent. "A good name, so just watch from the sidelines what true desperation looks like for people who can't recognize the strong." Lorian's head began to buzz. His first thought was that this prince had gone mad. Gilgamesh wasn't recognized for strength or appearance, but he definitely wasn't stronger than Arturo, who had been training in the water god style for over 7 years. At most, Prince Gilgamesh could be in the early stages of an advanced standard practitioner in some martial art, but he wasn't comparable to someone who surpassed him in experience and age. Lorian immediately regained his reasoning and went to find an instructor. He knew that if this fight continued, someone would likely be seriously injured, and there was even a danger of death. Chapter 8, Gilgamesh's Strength. The fight between Gilgamesh, a boy nobody knew, and Arturo, an advanced standard practitioner about to take a ranking test, was intentionally spread by the disciples of the Royal Water God Style Academy. The word about this quickly spread through the academy without any instructors intervening, as the higher-ranked ones were in a meeting with Simon. Arturo held considerable influence and popularity within the academy for achieving a stage that very few had reached, being recognized as a sword saint at the age of 18, which was a significant achievement considering he had trained within the academy for less than 8 years. In this month, he would be officially recognized as a sword saint, so everyone already knew of his strength. Here, he was considered a genius, whereas in other places, he might have been seen as unattainable. However, in Gilgamesh's eyes, he was nothing more than an incompetent. Even the adults who heard about this duel were surprised. They challenged Arturo. "He's a nobody. It's said he came to disrupt the training of the younger ones and even called them dogs." Despite his unknown skills, Arturo possesses incredible combat physique. Does anyone have any idea if that boy stands a chance against Arturo? Some of the academy students who had never heard of Gilgamesh were highly intrigued. It was normal. Not just anyone could enter the academy, let alone challenge one of the most promising swordsmen here with such confidence. No matter how crazy one was, they wouldn't face someone who could easily leave them crippled. On the other hand, no one really knew Gilgamesh, as only a few had seen him in recent years. Furthermore, Gilgamesh's current appearance differed greatly from the previous owner of his body. Taking this into account, it's also worth considering that he had never been presented to the public at noble banquets or birthdays like his other 2 brothers. Everyone is worrying too much. No matter who this boy is, if he's someone who accepted a formal duel, it doesn't matter if he's from royalty. He must adhere to the rules of the duel they've agreed upon. But since nobody knows him, he's probably just a piece of trash from a noble family. By looking at his hands, we can tell he hasn't practiced any sword usage because of them. One student replied mockingly. Could he be a wizard? After hearing this question, the older individuals who knew nothing about Gilgamesh became even more perplexed. A wizard facing a swordsman in a confined setting? If that were the case, that wizard either didn't value their life or was severely misinformed. Not only was the water god style one of the strongest combat styles, but it was also specialized in dealing with wizards and defending against various types of attacks. Should we interfere if things get bloody? Arturo is known not to stop attacking until his opponent surrenders completely. He's like a rabbit that has lived its whole life in a burrow, a complete idiot. A significant number of people lost interest, believing that the fight would end after just one move. In their eyes, a single move from Arturo was enough to defeat Gilgamesh. This news eventually reached the ears of some instructors who were not present at the meeting and guards from various locations. They ignored the issue, considering it a child's game that would be resolved through the formal duel. One of the instructors who was well informed about the situation remarked, "The fourth prince must be completely insane. Maybe this is for the best to prevent him from causing trouble in places where he can't be protected. Leaving someone crippled is nothing to be proud of, but if that prince, who hasn't left his room since birth, tarnishes his family's name, let this be a lesson." This comment caused some instructors to furrow their brows. After all, it was still the fourth prince. In the present, they could kill you for anything, and if it turns out that this prince is a hidden talent who has concealed his strength since birth, the one who might end up in a bad state is the boy named Arturo. After all, they had heard about the incident at the inn where many had died, and the fourth prince emerged unscathed. There are three factions supporting the princes and the princess, all vying for the throne of the Azura kingdom. These three had been paying attention since Gilgamesh showed his teeth, waiting to see if it was wise to attack or better to stay on the sidelines. Realistically, Prince Gilgamesh was just a boy destined to die at the hands of one of his siblings at any moment before the true Gilgamesh arrived in this world. This made many dismiss the matter as something not worth paying attention to, as at any moment, someone could take care of him. Some instructors were nervous because they didn't know what might happen next. Others simply watched from the sidelines with smiles on their faces. They believed that if this enraged the king, they could leave all this responsibility to Simon, his personal guard. After all, they were in this academy to evaluate the prince's abilities, and this required subjecting him to intense battles set up by Simon to determine how strong he was. While the instructors were still contemplating, Gilgamesh was already in the central area of the battlefield. As expected, there was a crowd gathered to witness the beating everyone had been talking about. They just wanted to watch and bet on whether Arturo would defeat Gilgamesh with a single swing of his sword or if he would slowly injure him. There were two sides to this battle, those who justified Arturo's actions and those who didn't like the idea as it would damage the academy's reputation. However, as this was a formal combat agreed upon by the two parties involved, they couldn't interfere. When Arturo stepped onto the battle stage, one of his friends shouted loudly, "Arturo, leave him crippled for disrespecting us." Another chimed in and said, "A strike from your sword is too merciful for him. He dared to call us dogs, make sure he suffers until he surrenders in disgrace. Severe injuries are not necessary, just fight honorably and defeat your opponent so he learns that he can't insult anyone without the strength to back up his words. There's no need for bloodshed today, especially with an important event in the afternoon." On the battlefield, Gilgamesh looked at Arturo and cruelly mocked, "Do the cowards of this place join you to give you orders? No, wait, if they think they can speak, they should step onto the stage and be crushed alongside you. I'm disappointed, I never imagined there would be such trash in a knight's academy. You damn fool, I only need one swing of my sword to take your head from your body." In an icy tone, Arturo raised his head proudly and looked down at his opponent. "Ha ha ha, you're a damn bad dog. Just for this, I must teach an important lesson to all the idiotic nobles gathered here." Gilgamesh walked to the side and took a metal sword. In normal circumstances or moments earlier in his life, he wouldn't have fought on equal terms with trash like Arturo. However, now he wanted to start being different from his childhood in Uruk. What he had discovered when facing the apostles of the gods was that if he was serious from the start, if he fought on equal terms and with all his strength right from the beginning, very few opponents could come out alive after facing him. Plus, he enjoyed seeing their expressions when he severed their limbs with his sword. "Come on, my dog, if you want to fight, let your skills speak and stop spewing so many useless words." Gilgamesh responded with open disdain for his opponent. His left hand gripped his sword tightly, pointing the edge toward Arturo, and with a cold tone, he proclaimed, "Make your move. Die." Enraged by the contempt Gilgamesh had shown him in front of everyone, Arturo made his first move without knowing his enemy's capabilities. With his fighting energy, a sword strike capable of cutting through anything materialized in the air, as fast as lightning. The fighting energy coalesced at the tip of the sword and aimed straight for Gilgamesh's heart, accompanied by all the fury Arturo had mustered. Gilgamesh restrained his strength to toy with Arturo, so instead of retreating, he took a step forward. With each step he took, the sword in his left hand glowed with a golden hue and spun like a vicious serpent. With a simple sword movement, he completely deflected Arturo's furious attack. There was a scraping sound, indicating the contact of a sword's edge with clothing, and it reached the scene. Arturo's sword cut a small piece of Gilgamesh's clothing, narrowly avoiding any harm. Though it didn't injure him, it had damaged his attire, which meant a lot to Gilgamesh, who had matched his strength to Arturo's. Damn it! Arturo smiled coldly until he realized that his still advancing sword had veered off, beyond his control, and his opponent's right hand began to move. With his vision obstructed, Gilgamesh's left hand, which held his sword, disappeared from Arturo's field of view. In just one exchange of attacks, Arturo lost sight of what Gilgamesh did next. Well! Gilgamesh's sword attack was ruthless and ferocious. Those who noticed it opened their eyes in horror. This attack doubled Arturo's speed, and with flexibility, he moved and appeared at his enemy's sword in the blink of an eye. Those who didn't know what was happening cheered for Arturo, believing he had landed a hit on Gilgamesh's shoulder. However, in the same second Gilgamesh appeared on Arturo's back, his sword still spinning, several high-ranking instructors arrived. One of the instructors saw Gilgamesh's attack and shouted in panic, "Please, spare him, fourth prince." Yet, a second later, as if Gilgamesh's sword hadn't heard, it advanced toward Arturo's neck and forcefully pierced through, making its way into his mouth like a ferocious spear. Everything came to a halt, and the tip of the sword that had penetrated Arturo was dripping with blood. Everyone witnessed a brutal murder unlike anything they had ever seen before. Without mercy, Gilgamesh lifted his foot and hurled Arturo's lifeless body forward. The force with which he threw his enemy's corpse was so great that it rolled several times, and parts of his body crumbled like paper. Crack! 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 The position in which Arturo's body lay was so grave that everyone was horrified. Wasn't this supposed to be a formal duel? How did it end in a deadly fight? Blood soon filled the arena. On the other hand, Arturo's eyes slowly closed with flashes of remorse and confusion. He didn't understand how he had been defeated. How was he supposed to know that he was facing a demigod with the intent to kill? What a joke, even the gods themselves avoided fighting Gilgamesh. Although Gilgamesh was considered a god even by his own people, it held no sway in this world. Furthermore, Arturo didn't maximize the potential of his water god-style technique, which involved waiting for the opponent to attack. Instead, he had rushed towards Gilgamesh with the intention of harming him. At this moment, the entire battlefield was completely silent. Laughter and mockery had vanished. It seemed as though time had frozen. It seems I pushed my strength a bit more than I should have. An attack ended up damaging my clothing. Recalling what had just happened, Lorian, who had alerted the higher UPS, was incredibly stunned. They had fought on equal terms, and Arturo had lost? As for the disciples of the Water God Style Academy, their souls had not returned to their bodies. Arturo had stood out greatly among his peers, but he had been mutilated with a single attack by the mysterious fourth prince. Simon, as Gilgamesh's royal guard, was the first to appear by his prince's side, confused by what he had just witnessed. What had happened here for the prince to engage in combat with a student from this place? It's not that big of a deal. That idiot thought he could overpower me and had clear intentions to kill me, so I responded with the same strength and coldness he displayed. Gilgamesh smiled contemptuously, as if the death of someone had not affected him in the slightest. Chapter 9, Gilgamesh's Cruelty. While Arturo was not someone who shook the world, he was not lacking in skill either. Otherwise, he wouldn't be on the verge of becoming a sword saint. Many witnessed what happened from start to finish, and they all understood that it was a death that could have been avoided if only there had been dialogue. Arrogance can be a good trait, but when you don't know how to use it and, on top of that, misjudge your opponent, it can cost you your life. Many felt uneasy as they realized that life could end at any moment. In their eyes, Gilgamesh was merely a member of some noble family who was a fool, but in the end, he turned out to be the fourth prince. Simon carefully observed Gilgamesh. As a person who had seen the world, he could discern a person's characteristics and emotions with just one glance. However, Gilgamesh, 10 years his junior, was unreadable. 10 years old was quite advanced for someone to understand the intricacies of swordplay, duels, and death. But the young prince Gilgamesh was impossible to have comprehended all of this while confined to his room. Therefore, Simon began to believe that a master had trained the young prince from an early age. The current Gilgamesh possessed a calm aura as deep as the ocean, and the sensation he evoked in others was hard to describe. Outstanding sword skills, heightened senses, superhuman strength, a battle aura, an unknown sword style, and much more deliberate movements made everyone doubt the fairness of the battle. Initially, everyone had wanted to tease Gilgamesh, who was incredibly attractive and seemed exceedingly arrogant. However, in these recent days, Gilgamesh's calmness and arrogance were, naturally, a part of who he was. This is a terrible disaster. Simon panicked as he didn't know how to act in this situation. Your evaluation is over, we need to go back home. Staying at this moment was like being prepared to face any kind of backlash, as the young man who had just died at the hands of Gilgamesh could have been the child of a great influence. And the one responsible for all these events stood by, wiping the blood from his hand with a disgusted expression. Afterward, he said calmly, "My evaluation is not over yet, my official rank has not been announced." Simon glared angrily at Gilgamesh, truly wanting to give him a beating and drag him home regardless of his opinion. However, he thought about the consequences of leaving in that manner, and all his energy drained away. None of this matters, you're worried because you fear the repercussions we would face from this. But he's just a sorry fellow, and no one will seek justice for his death. Do you think you are invincible just because you killed a swordsman in the early stages of becoming a sword saint? With all due respect, I seriously doubt you understand the true strength a person can wield. Not to mention other swordsmen, there are countless things that could end our lives. I won't be able to protect you this way, Prince. Simon's words were humiliating but realistic. In reality, there was a possibility that the boy he had just killed was the child of an influential figure. And if that man was stronger than them, they would simply be corpses buried 6 feet under. No one could stop a man driven by grief over the loss of a loved one. My dear royal guard, there's nothing to recover from. Gilgamesh said indifferently. If there's something you can't face, I'll handle it without any problem. I want to see with my own eyes who would dare to kill whom. Titled men, crowned nobles, or influential organizations, those fools can't reach the pinnacle of this world and can never dream of killing me. Royal Knight Simon was at a disadvantage when it came to reasoning with Prince Gilgamesh. This child had just insulted so many individuals with national titles, noble families in the Azura country, and hidden organizations. If they hadn't reached the pinnacle of this world, he couldn't imagine who could. You. At that moment, a deeply cold voice echoed from a distance. Simon's expression changed abruptly, and he instantly broke into a cold sweat. He hurried outside to see what was happening and found many disciples armed with swords. It seems things are getting much tenser, my prince. It appears you've killed someone complicated, Simon worriedly realized. Only now did he regret not summoning more royal soldiers. At the same time, a crowd entered the training area, led by the most powerful figure present. Senior Elian, your son, and the 4th prince had a fair duel. I suggest you maintain composure to resolve this matter as best as possible. Seeing Elian's expression, Simon knew they couldn't avoid the responsibility that both of them bore. So, as Gilgamesh's royal guard, he had to step forward while remaining on high alert. Explanations? Then you can explain it to my son, who is dead right now. His name was Arturo. Elian pointed to his son's lifeless body, his expression incredibly grim. No wonder. Gilgamesh walked slowly toward Elian, locking eyes with him with a cold expression. No wonder this place was so turbulent and divided. It's because of fools like your son who believe that coming from prominent families makes them someone in this life. Both Simon and the other instructors grew nervous. There was no one stronger above the king rank, so if Elian attempted to harm the Prince Gilgamesh, they would have to hold what they could even if they didn't last long. Well, for heaven's sake, a prince like you turns out to be so arrogant toward someone who does nothing but bolster the might of the Azura kingdom. Did you take this stance out of sheer capriciousness? Merely addressing me in that tone is more than enough reason to kill you 1,000 times over, consequences be damned. Elian's killing intent multiplied several times, and a battle aura enveloped his body, causing the people nearby to hurriedly step back. After all, Elian was a mighty sword king, likely on the verge of ascending to a rank that few could achieve in a lifetime. This time, Simon stepped forward, placing his arm on Elian's shoulder to prevent the situation from escalating further. Knight Simon, do not make a mistake. Elian channeled his energy throughout his body, causing his entire being to shine with a battle aura that pressed down on Simon, who showed resistance. Elian, the Bone Crusher, are you willing to go so far as to throw your life away for these actions? Without displaying any emotion, Elian declared, if you decide to step in to defend that demon, then I will take care of both of you, no matter if I have to give my life in the process. Do you speak in that tone to a prince of the Azura kingdom? Although I don't care what you do, I could crush you right now for uttering those words without any fear in the process. Gilgamesh, who was being protected by Simon, chuckled lightly and said, it seems the Water God-style academy has become arrogant with royalty. I wonder what my father would do if he found out that a member of this academy took such a stance. Chapter 10, Overwhelming Power. Gilgamesh took a step forward, not bothering to look at Elian. He turned his head as if surveying the area and said, I don't care if you're a king-rank swordsman, I don't care who's behind you, or if my father shares my thoughts. A god of the sword or of magic, it matters not to me. If you wish to step forward, be my guest. But expect to receive twice the cruelty in return, for I will not only kill you and all those necessary but also ensure that future problems are dealt with regarding those who are part of your family. Well, well, well. I'll cut you into pieces, sever your tendons, and then spit on your corpse. At that moment, I'd like to see how you plan to kill me. Elian had lost his temper. As if losing a son wasn't enough, he couldn't bear the arrogance of Gilgamesh's threats, and he had to do it in front of his son's lifeless body. At 40 years old, this was a comical scene he had witnessed at an unimaginable moment in his life. In all his battles that he had won, it was the first time he had encountered someone so arrogant, someone who looked down on him no matter who he was. At that moment, everyone on the scene wanted to sew Gilgamesh's mouth shut to stop his nonsense. However, since the fourth prince was eager to die, there was nothing they could do. Gilgamesh slowly walked toward Elian and extended his hand forward, ready to summon a decent weapon to face this man who seemed to want an equal footing. You foolish boy, meet your death. Elian took a step back to create some distance between himself and Simon, and the tip of his sword aimed at Gilgamesh. Halt! A voice, like thunder, echoed throughout the academy. No one could contain their battle fervor upon hearing that tone and coldness in the voice, it made them feel like their very souls were being pierced. Because of that voice, Simon, who had already drawn his sword, breathed a sigh of relief, only now did his tense muscles relax. Commander Ragnar. Elian, who was about to attack, instinctively stopped, a sense of impending death coursing through his body. It was a fair competition. When one dies, only oneself should blame for being foolish enough not to see someone more powerful than they could handle. Ragnar's voice continued to resonate in the surroundings. Rumors had it that Ragnar was just one step away from becoming a sword god in the water god style, but many disagreed with this, as the last male sword god had died a long time ago, and it was hard to believe that another one existed. Nevertheless, everyone held great respect for Ragnar, who was a commander in the imperial forces of the Azura kingdom. Our loyalty lies with the kingdom that supported us from the very beginning, protected us as we grew, and will take care of us when we pass, Ragnar said, ignoring Elian's son's death, letting his cold words leave an impression on everyone's thoughts. However, we will consider if the young fourth prince wishes to challenge someone more powerful to gauge his true sword skills. Gilgamesh relaxed his expression and said, finally, someone with a brain spoke in this place, and as the master of my own decisions, I want to challenge someone with the title Sword King, and if I desire, we can have a duel to the death, Lord Elian. Concluding his words, he walked outside and said, the fight will be today, but I'd like many to witness the death of a man who couldn't properly educate his son. Everyone, regardless of who they were, looked at Gilgamesh with horror. A 10-year-old facing a death duel with a man roughly in his 40s with the title of Sword King? The young prince is definitely completely mad. Simon, who glanced at Elian, shook his head and followed Gilgamesh, who had already left without notice. Young prince, if you want to die, please don't drag him down with you. Come on, Simon, I'm very satisfied with your behavior. You didn't back down no matter what the situation was. Your will overcame your fears, something that's hard to achieve as a man. Gilgamesh, not wanting to be taken back to the carriage, removed Simon's hands and looked up at the sky. You. You. Simon couldn't contain his emotions at this moment. Prince, don't you know that Elian is known for shattering his enemies' bones with his sword before killing them? He's a warrior who very possibly, in about 10 years, can reach a level that very few in this world attain. Is he that incredible? It's too late now, and I've challenged him to a death duel. Besides, I prefer to judge men on the battlefield. Of course, Gilgamesh couldn't reveal his secrets. If he wished, he could have wiped out the entire Water God-style academy, but he had promised himself to be more human and seek a new purpose in life. If he was now causing havoc, it was for a reason, and that reason was to obtain a title by killing another, so they would stop bothering him. Simon didn't say anything more, he had grown tired and no longer tried to convince Gilgamesh. After all he could do was protect him, and if he died today, he would too. You better be strong enough to at least hold your ground. You should know I've already sent a letter to the king to take charge of this matter. The old man who calls himself my father? I don't remember his face, so I don't care. Gilgamesh walked toward the distant building to wait while he looked for something to eat. The battle would take place in the Colosseum, which would be set up specifically for those who would face off and for those who wanted to watch. This news spread like wildfire throughout the city, and within a few minutes, hundreds of people gathered out of sheer curiosity. Have you heard? The mysterious Prince Gilgamesh is going to face off against the Sword King, the Bone Breaker, in a death match. How old is the fourth prince? About 10. As the Colosseum began to fill up, all the disciples of the Water God-style academy appeared and filled the closest rows. Their expectations were high, as Gilgamesh didn't seem to be weak at all when they saw him easily defeat Arturo. Chapter 11, Who will win? There was a highly controversial debate regarding the decisions made by the fourth prince, Gilgamesh Azura. Some believed that he had done well to demand respect for the commoners, who often went unnoticed despite forming the majority in the Azura kingdom's armies. Arturo had been a complete imbecile with his training companions, and his arrogance had hit rock bottom when he faced someone much stronger than himself. So, many considered Gilgamesh as someone who had brought divine justice. Others were very angry with him. This was a matter of their mindset and how they felt about things. They believed that Gilgamesh should be punished. This was understandable as someone about whom very little was known had insulted many of the apprentices, calling them dogs. This arrogance was especially poorly received by the nobles, as they considered it a humiliation to hear Gilgamesh's threats. In some, there was hatred in their eyes, waiting for Gilgamesh's downfall. In the Colosseum stands, they began to talk amongst themselves. Elian will end up killing him. I just hope the royal knights don't interfere in this duel. I doubt it. It would greatly damage the reputation of the royalty and insult all the knights who respect the code of honor in duels. If the prince spoke, he must stand by his words. I'm sure Elian will cut off his legs, and after that, he'll kill him. However, if he does that, he'll be killed on the spot by the knights who have already surrounded the Colosseum. Cut off his legs? If anyone were to harm my son, that would be a small punishment. Does this 10-year-old prince want to take the title of a sword king? He has to be defeated in front of thousands of people so he learns to respect his elders. He must swallow all the shame that we once felt in our lives. The conversations quickly turned into shouts. The crowd divided into two parts, one supporting Gilgamesh and the other merely waiting for his downfall, feeling nothing else. Simon, who saw the crowd growing, trembled with fear because this would be a severe blow to the royalty if they interfered in the fight with Elian. Gilgamesh, who suddenly had a bottle of liquor in his hands, walked through the waiting room. Any other person, whether a child or an adult, would have already fainted from fear of being surrounded by so many people. At that moment, Ragnar entered the Colosseum. His presence subdued the shouts and conversations of the people in the vicinity. No matter how noisy the surroundings were, everyone stopped talking instantly when they saw him. The aura of a sword emperor enveloped the surroundings, leaving everyone in absolute silence. At that moment, Ragnar began to speak and said, "We warriors respect formal duels. These duels are meant to resolve conflicts and put an end to many other problems that both sides may create for others. The fourth prince defeated someone who would have soon become a sword saint, so no one should underestimate his strength. Therefore, this duel is valid, and under the authority I represent, I attest that no one will interfere until one of the two surrenders or dies." Gilgamesh sat in a chair as he listened to this well-delivered speech that silenced everyone. Then he turned to Simon, who was beside him, and said, "In a man's life, he will face numerous challenges, many of which can end the life of whoever confronts them. I don't know which faction among my older siblings is determined to kill me, so I will send them a very clear message today. Gilgamesh looked at the entire crowd that had gathered around and said, "Today, I will show them that anyone who wants to come to me must at least be worthy of facing me, otherwise, I won't even give them the opportunity to speak to me." Fourth Prince. Simon was left speechless, not knowing when or how he had come to feel that he was in the presence of someone incredibly powerful. "From now on, do not question my decisions, do not deny or approve of what I do. If you want to stand by my side and reach the pinnacle of the world, then accept that I am someone invincible," said Gilgamesh with a penetrating gaze towards Simon. "Yes, Your Highness, forgive my imprudence for doubting you." Simon knelt on one knee, his impassive gaze directed at the Prince Gilgamesh, whom he had cared for over 3 years. Gilgamesh was now tolerating Simon's behavior a bit more, as if he hadn't acted this way to protect him, he would have long been in a different place. Then, Elian and Gilgamesh, step forward. Ragnar shouted as he watched Elian advance slowly with a somber expression. This idiot has no idea what he's gotten himself into. He's in the presence of the Prince Gilgamesh, whom His Highness considers the most capable of becoming the future king of the Azura Kingdom. His strength was already noteworthy before he was kidnapped, but afterward, it seems that the desire to excel awakened within the Prince Gilgamesh. Ragnar was well acquainted with the king, who lamented Gilgamesh's attitude of avoiding standing out and showcasing all his abilities, talents in magic, and intelligence. But now, that had changed since he had experienced a near-death encounter. It seemed that everyone saw this as a warning. "Gilgamesh, it seems you planned everything carefully since that letter arrived at the Water God-style Academy. Did you foresee it all from the beginning, or was it just mere coincidence?" Ragnar looked at Gilgamesh, who approached with an arrogant smile, a gaze that radiated superior authority toward everyone. Even Ragnar had never seen someone so haughty and arrogant as Gilgamesh. He could see in his gaze that he enjoyed instilling fear in others, and from the beginning, he manipulated things so that everyone would eventually witness his battle with a king-ranked swordsman. Very few knew, but if Gilgamesh could truly defeat a king-ranked swordsman, it could be said that few would believe it to be true. And when that happened, the fourth prince's name would be accused of plagiarism, so by foreseeing this from the start, he desired to fight in front of thousands of people. This was terrifying. No, it was something more than that, and only the most discerning could perceive it. "Now that both of you are in the arena, remember once more the rules. This will be a confrontation to assess Gilgamesh's strength and quell internal conflicts. The battle doesn't end until one surrenders or dies, so may the best man win." Ragnar stepped back, and as he did so, everyone in the vicinity held their breath. "I still can't believe you feel no shame, old man. Haven't you looked around?" Gilgamesh asked with a calm look and said, "Here, it no longer matters whether I killed your stupid son or not. Now, everyone is looking at you as a coward and not as someone seeking revenge for his son's death. Shut your mouth, Prince Gilgamesh. No one here will interfere in this battle that you accepted anyway. So when I break your bones, I want to see that same expression of disdain on your face." Elian had lost all traces of anger, so he concentrated and drew his sword. He had sensed it. Gilgamesh was a damn demon hiding his strength from the beginning. His demonic eye warned him that there was a big predator in front of him, so in this battle, he didn't have the advantage. "Aren't you underestimating me too much?" Gilgamesh snapped his fingers with a smile, and behind him, the gate of Babylon was opened. Chapter 12, You Are Not Worthy. Is that magic? It's possible the prince plans to use magic at the start of the fight to weaken Elian, but that idea is quite bad since the water god's fighting style is prepared to counter any type of magic. What kind of magic could that be? This was the first time the Babylon gate would open in a fight in this world, but he didn't want to attack at least at the beginning of the battle. At least Elian wasn't worthy of making him use his precious weapons, so he only opened his Babylon gate to draw a weapon. A golden ripple soon revealed the hilt of a crimson sword. This sword was cursed, and its magical ability was to release a blood slash at regular intervals. When Gilgamesh drew this sword, the golden ripple behind him eventually closed, and everyone felt that what they had just witnessed was something incredible. Gilgamesh ignored the commotion around him and looked towards Elian, who hadn't moved an inch since summoning a weapon. "When someone shows me a bit of respect, then I'll treat them the same way. But if someone dares to disrespect me, believe me, I'll repay them tenfold," Gilgamesh said with a calm gaze. "You arrogant bastard!" In the battlefield, surrounded by spectators, Elian was determined to crush Gilgamesh. He wanted to tear him apart in front of everyone, even if it was the last thing he did in this life. Simon and many others wanted to believe in Gilgamesh. Although the chances of winning were slim, he seemed to have some skill with the initial display. Can the fourth prince really defeat Elian? Since the rumors that the prince Gilgamesh had eliminated dozens of men, killed someone close to being a sword saint, and then displayed that strange magic, the disciples of the Water God Style Academy considered him a worthy opponent. An older man in the crowd said with absolute certainty, the difference is still colossal. Prince Gilgamesh is just a child of no more than 10 or 11 years old. He wouldn't be able to win unless he's extremely proficient in magic or has some kind of blessing, but that's not realistic. Even if he's the reincarnation of some kind of legendary hero or warrior, he wouldn't have enough strength to defeat a sword king. That's right, a child can't beat an adult in swordsmanship, as that's something unheard of considering these kinds of strength disparities. The Water God style is known for not bestowing many Sword King titles, unlike the Northern style, so we can imagine how difficult it is to attain that rank and how strong Elian must be. I agree, a life-or-death battle with an opponent like Elian is a guaranteed defeat. However, we shouldn't dismiss the fact that it was the Prince Gilgamesh who challenged a Sword King. He must have something hidden up his sleeve to have that kind of confidence. A disciple who had witnessed the battle between Arturo and Gilgamesh said, when he fought against Arturo, someone close to being a sword saint, he restrained his strength, and we all saw a golden fighting aura enveloping his body. Those who were speaking fell into contemplation. A fighting aura at such a young age was something no one had ever achieved, an accomplishment that would grant the Prince Gilgamesh an irrevocable title. If the prince continued to train, he could easily aspire to become a sword god. Fighting aura, at the age of 10 or 11, as a prince of one of the most powerful kingdoms, possessing the aptitude to learn swordsmanship and the will to confront enemies no matter how strong they are, Gilgamesh had now demonstrated something that many deemed impossible in life. That's why many of those who wanted to see him suffer fell silent. Most people respect the strong and talents that would become pillars of humanity in a short period of time, so it wasn't wise to act that way now. If you don't attack, I will. Elian roared as a sinister fighting aura enveloped both his sword and body, rising up like an arrow, pointing toward Gilgamesh, who seemed to be underestimating his opponent's strength. This kind of battle aura could serve as both defense and offense, and he was now ready to move. You will die by my hands. Elian's battle energy seemed to take shape, and several knives flew out of his body, hovering in the air, all aimed at Gilgamesh. In total, there were 12 blades, all controlled solely by battle energy, ready to be launched at any moment. The 12-nail technique. Someone who had heard stories about Elian exclaimed with absolute surprise. Elian's battle energy is so unique that if he concentrates enough, he can manipulate 12 daggers and attack the enemy. But the most impressive part is that these daggers are not meant to kill, their real purpose is to torture the enemy. Witnessing that they were facing a predator who had killed countless people, Elian displayed his full strength from the start because he didn't want to underestimate a demon like Gilgamesh. By using these skills, even Ragnar would find it difficult to evade all the dagger attacks. After launching the 12 daggers, Elian would switch to an offensive battle style to end his opponent's life. Elian was ready and shouted at Gilgamesh, "Move now, little devil, I'm going to destroy you." Ha ha ha. Gilgamesh held his head and mocked Elian's words, as he could crush him in 100 different ways without even moving a single muscle. However, as he wanted to leave a deep mark in the hearts of all those present and also had other plans in mind, he chose to use a sword. "Are you going to destroy me?" Gilgamesh shook his head and said, "You, by yourself, are not enough. Let me beat you with this dull sword until I disfigure your stupid face, and no one will recognize who you are after this fight." With that said, he raised his cursed crimson sword. Simon and everyone present saw the sword, which occasionally gleamed. Wasn't that sword infused with some kind of magic? Everyone had expected Gilgamesh to use magic at the start of the fight, but they were all surprised when he pulled a sword seemingly out of some strange storage magic. Therefore, Gilgamesh, who wasn't using magic at the beginning of the fight, left everyone wondering what to think. Elian's daggers would incapacitate the prince in just a few seconds. Simon and Ragnar's only thought was to save Gilgamesh's life the moment he was on the brink of death, no matter the cost or the consequences that might follow. Using a sword instead of magic? Isn't that just asking to die without a complete body? Elian squinted his eyes, and under his initial observation, he didn't discover anything more than a slightly glowing sword. Indeed, he was concerned that this might be a special magical treasure. However, despite his highly trained senses and vision, he found nothing more than a dull blade in Gilgamesh's hands. There were no magical enchantments, no hidden weapons. Just a blunt red sword against Elion's daggers and sword. Gilgamesh pointed his sword at Elion and said, "Come at me, dog, allow me to crush you in front of everyone present and be my stepping stone to a future of greater glory. I'll kill you." Elion shouted as the 12 daggers moved into the sky, covered in a battle aura, all of these daggers dancing in the sky heading toward Gilgamesh. Their paths traced arcs of violet light. The fourth prince will be killed. Many averted their gaze as they didn't want to witness such a bloody scene. It seemed as if Elion wanted to eliminate Gilgamesh in a single strike since this would be his only chance, considering that someone else might intervene. "Ha ha ha, that's it!" Gilgamesh shouted with a satisfied smile upon seeing the attack. He yelled and rushed forward, swinging his sword. The scene everyone had been expecting didn't unfold. The 12 daggers met a crimson energy from Gilgamesh's sword along their path. Elion's battle energy dissipated, and the 12 daggers fell to the ground one after another, as if these daggers had collided with an energy so powerful that it prevented their advance. Elion had not regained his composure upon seeing how his attack had been stopped in this manner, but Gilgamesh, who had advanced at a terrifying speed, was already in front of him. The golden sword passed through his guard, and dozens of blows struck his body. "Boy, I'll pound you into pulp." Elion didn't retreat but instead advanced quickly towards Gilgamesh, condensing his battle energy around his body once again. "This time, I'll succeed." However, it was in vain, his battle energy dissipated as soon as it appeared around his body. After seeing how the sword in Gilgamesh's hand shone, he understood one thing: it seemed that the sword absorbed any type of energy. So, he opted to move his sword and respond to the attacks, but the distance had closed so much that his best techniques were useless at this point. Gilgamesh's sword struck the weak points of the water god style technique, and because Elion knew nothing of his opponent's movements and fighting style, he found himself at a disadvantage. Whenever Elion tried to move his sword, Gilgamesh attacked in the open areas, nullifying his enemy's attacks. Finally, a blow was delivered to Elion's face. Because Gilgamesh's sword was blunt, it left a reddened mark with crushed blood beneath his skin. Feeling disoriented, Elion felt his head throb, and the vision in his eye blurred. "You're mine!" Bam! 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 In the blink of an eye, Elion was overwhelmed and used more force than he intended in this battle. As a result, dozens of strikes flew towards Elion's body. All these blows targeted joints, vital muscles, and the most effective areas to cause damage and slow down his opponent's body. Dust billowed, and the ground began to shatter due to the relentless attacks resonating throughout the Colosseum. Elion appeared like a practice dummy in Gilgamesh's eyes, attacking without pause. Elion was incapable of counterattacking. His battle energy, battle technique, and everything he should do were in disarray. In less than 2 minutes, he fell to the ground with numerous broken bones. Gilgamesh's sword, though blunt, could unleash waves of attacks that could cut through more than 100 sword strikes if needed, and its cursed ability was to absorb any type of energy it came into contact with, whether from its owner or the enemy. Unless Gilgamesh's opponent was a sword emperor or a mage, the sword in Gilgamesh's hands was more than sufficient to overpower any sword king. One of the prerequisites to becoming a sword emperor in this world was advancing in the technique they used and increasing their battle aura along with their strength. It's worth noting that Gilgamesh was constantly regaining all of his true strength, so these simple battles were merely part of his entertainment. The sword in his hand also had a unique specialty due to its curse: it was that it couldn't kill its enemy. No matter how many times you struck, as long as the sword's internal energy wasn't used, the opponent wouldn't die. This was highly suitable for Gilgamesh, which is why he had taken this sword and stored it among his treasures. Thud! 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 After Elion had fallen to the ground, Gilgamesh showed no mercy. He continued to strike the most vital and difficult to heal bones over and over again. Elion's body was now covered in wounds, his bones began to turn to dust, and his muscles were severely damaged. This scene shook the hearts of the spectators. Ragnar looked at Gilgamesh and furrowed his brow. This strength was by no means something a human child could possess. But no matter how he observed, he couldn't find anything out of the ordinary aside from the fact that this strength belonged to Gilgamesh. Chapter 13, The Sleeping Demon. It's natural that someone like Elion couldn't see through Gilgamesh's combat style, as it was forged in his battles when he rebelled against the gods. During his life as Emperor of Humanity, there were few warriors explicitly sent to eliminate him who surpassed him in swordsmanship. It should be understood that with a single glance of his eyes, Gilgamesh learned Elion's weaknesses, his fighting style, the strength of his blows, and what he needed to do to eliminate him without much effort. If one were to ascend what he could predict, regardless of whether he had to use the Babylon Gate, he would do so with all his might, as in the ancient war he had learned not to underestimate the messengers of the gods. "I will kill you." Despite his tattered body, broken bones, and mangled flesh, due to Elian's intense determination, he could still move his right hand. Beneath his belt, 2 slender daggers appeared in his hands and flew towards Gilgamesh's heart. Elian had an incredible physique because he began training as far back as he could remember, which is why he was only a few years away from being considered one of the strongest within his rank. The pair of hidden daggers in his clothing was his last resort, he couldn't do more than that after receiving a beating from someone he considered inferior. Thud. Thud. Gilgamesh's sword in his hand deflected the daggers, anticipating Elian's intentions. "If you want to die quickly." Gilgamesh said this in a cold tone. Upon seeing the daggers deflected, he swiftly grabbed them with his hands and hurled them towards Elian. Whoosh! Whoosh! These same 2 daggers pierced Elian's shoulders and firmly pinned him to the ground, immobilizing his body. Gilgamesh continued to strike Elian's body over and over again, feeling angry that this man had resorted to such a dishonorable move. "That's enough." At that moment, Ragnar could no longer bear to witness this bloody and ferocious scene. He leaped into the Colosseum arena and stopped the battle. Gilgamesh looked at him and said in a questioning tone, "Now what, Ragnar? Since I defeated a Sword King, I didn't plan on an Emperor of the Sword deciding to join the fight. Young Prince, you've already proven to be as strong as a Sword King, so from now on, that will be the title you deserve." Ragnar was taken aback by Gilgamesh's confidence, so he immediately clarified what he meant. Gilgamesh stepped away from Elian, looked at Ragnar, and then said, "What would you do if a Sword King had bone-deep intentions to kill you?" "What? I was going to let him live, but..." After saying that, Gilgamesh's right hand, holding his cursed sword, glowed in a crimson hue, and numerous blood cuts flew towards Elian's body. These cuts pierced through Elian's body, cutting him into several pieces. The energy cuts that hit the ground created a rain of blood. That's how problems are ended. Elian, the bone-crushing Sword King, had died in combat against the 4th prince, Gilgamesh Azura. No one could react for a long time, and the silence was so suffocating. "Now that you're finished, it would be an honor to have a private conversation with you." Ragnar bowed slightly and then looked at the crowd. "The battle is over, the winner is the Prince Gilgamesh Azura, the youngest Sword King in the history of humanity." "Well done, Prince. Incredible swordsmanship. Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh. It's been a long time since I felt this sensation." Gilgamesh looked at all those who praised him, some were unaware of what had happened here, and others cheered out of fear. That's how life was, the losers were trampled upon, and the winners wrote their own version of events accepted by all. Gilgamesh didn't care about this because he had never lost. So, after looking at Elian's lifeless body, he addressed the crowd, "My desire is to explore the world, so I plan to create a group to accompany me on this journey and in other exciting battles. If you're interested, don't forget to come and see me, and I promise you'll be 10 times stronger than you are now." Ragnar looked at Gilgamesh and gestured for him to accompany him. The more he looked at this young prince, the more fear he felt. This 10-year-old child was too terrifying. The room Gilgamesh entered was a special one at the top of the Colosseum, the most luxurious in this place. People of high status usually watched the tournaments from this location, and it was an important gathering point for those of high social status. Of course, Simon or any other knights couldn't enter as Ragnar had prevented it, and only Gilgamesh entered alongside him. At that moment, there were very powerful knights in the hallway leading to that room who looked at the Prince Gilgamesh with a look full of respect. Compared to the other 2 princes, Gilgamesh's future was very promising, as he was one of the strongest within the royalty. Since ancient times, there have been very powerful beings, and even today, there is a god who walks our world without being stopped. Saying this, Ragnar looked at Gilgamesh and continued, "The 7 great powers." When the Second Great Human-Demon War came to an end, a person known as the Technique God came up with the name. At that time, the Technique God was considered one of the strongest people in the world. The Technique God selected 6 more people and declared them the strongest in the world. The title of the 7 great powers was well known until the Laplace War. All of the original 7 powers participated in the Laplace War, except for the Technique God. Among them, 3 were killed, 1 disappeared and another was sealed. The dragon god was the only one who emerged from the war with an unchanged state of life. After hundreds of years, with the newcomers taking their place and the top 4 in an unknown state for the people, the title fell out of use. Ragnar didn't explain the reasons for saying this now, he simply began speaking without pause. Gilgamesh understood Ragnar's intentions. This man who had met the strongest of his time was very observant, so he believed that the true Gilgamesh's identity had been taken by someone else. An interesting story. I suppose the human king of your time wasn't very intelligent, or the human side was weak. But if I were king, I would have made sure that the human race completely eliminated those who were their enemies. Gilgamesh was not lying when he said this, because as the king of humanity, he marked a before and after for humans who regarded the gods as religious figures. He commanded all humans in the world, united all the divine beasts, and banished the beliefs that had been forged in the hearts of humans. The war against the beings created by the gods to eliminate them was tough and very long. Therefore, he knew firsthand what it meant to wage a war against 2 different species. You speak as if you have no idea, Ragnar said as he moved his hand and rested it on the hilt of his sword. Historical records show that humans were indeed at a disadvantage. There were no such opportunities to do what you are suggesting, as everyone would have tried it. I have limited knowledge of history, but if I were king, I would make that decision. In war, one must win, even if it means crushing the offspring of demons with their own hands. Gilgamesh recalled how he had let enemies go, only for them to become his enemies later. The strength you possess is impossible at the age of 10, so let me ask you a question. Ragnar looked at Gilgamesh and finally asked the question that had been bothering him, are you the incarnation of some kind of hero or warrior? Ha ha ha! Gilgamesh burst into laughter when he heard this question. He had never imagined that in this world, reincarnation or incarnation could be a common occurrence, which meant it had happened or could happen. After finishing laughing, Gilgamesh looked at Ragnar and replied, believe me, I wouldn't be this weak if that were the case. I am not the incarnation of any hero or being from 500 years ago. I'm not even a god, I'm just a simple human who will travel the world and crush those who stand in my way. Gilgamesh got up and walked toward the door. The only thing you need to know is that I am Gilgamesh Azura. I will take what I please from this world, as it is rightfully mine, and those who dare to stand in my way will be eliminated. I understand. I apologize for the inconvenience, Prince Gilgamesh. Ragnar clenched his fists and bid farewell to Gilgamesh. Chapter 14, I am Gilgamesh. The adults and instructors at the Water God Style Academy who watched Gilgamesh walk by without acknowledging them felt both annoyed and inspired. Annoyed because it was obvious they had been training longer than Gilgamesh, and yet he was so strong that he fought a king with a sword without even getting injured. It was clear that talent always triumphed over hard work. No matter how hard they tried, they could never reach that level. If the 4th prince were someone well known in the capital and at the Water God Style Academy, it would be a bit more acceptable. However, he seemed to have never trained with the same intensity as others. Gilgamesh couldn't blame them for these thoughts, as his blood was 2/3 divine and the rest human. Nevertheless, if there was something that weakened him, it was the fact that he was human and would eventually die when his age reached its limit, if he wished it to be so. If he wished it. That's correct, because when his best friend died, he traveled the world to obtain the fruit of immortality, and this fruit was in his gate of Babylon, stored with other precious treasures he had collected from around the world. He could eat it and become immortal, maybe prepare a precious elixir that would give him a longer lifespan than that of humans and demons to live alongside his future wife. That would be an incredible wedding gift, although it differed from his sense of being human and living life. After what happened today, what are your plans regarding the last thing you said? I really doubt that recruiting followers is necessary, as you could simply request royal resources for whatever you want to do. Simon asked while walking beside him to stay informed. Obviously, I can't make use of royal force because it's filled with noble families who might belong to one of the 3 factions vying for my father's throne, so I want to avoid dealing with that kind of trash, Gilgamesh replied. Gilgamesh naturally couldn't explain everything he intended to do with this matter, so he could only deal with some initial issues before his journey began. As a man who didn't usually like to get his hands dirty with every problem that arose, he wanted to assemble a close-knit group that would follow his orders without any specific purpose in mind. As a king who ruled during what he considered the golden age of humanity, he knew that if he wanted to achieve certain things, they should be left to loyal followers willing to follow him without any particular agenda. However, as the King of Uruk, he possessed considerable power, which had been bestowed upon him by the gods to lead humans on the path to divinity. But when the gods began their atrocities, he led a war to eliminate all trace of their existence and pave the way for human belief in man, woman, and child. Since then, he never wanted to have anything to do with any gods who only looked out for their divinity and their own interests. The path of humanity must be written by humans and not by gods, that must be the case until one dies. Of course, he knew there were gods in this world, but their presence and influence on humans were somewhat more reserved. None really had a significant impact on humanity, and he hoped it would stay that way, as he would have to eliminate the remaining gods so that he could finally live a normal life as a human and not as the emperor of humanity. Later, he would choose 1 or 2 wives to marry and live with for a few years. To die as a human and enjoy the prospect of feeling familial love. His life would no longer be so bloody. After all, his war with the gods and the warriors sent to kill him had ended. Who will be the diamond worthy of having me as a husband? Gilgamesh smiled and walked toward the waiting carriage. After receiving the title of Sword King and having everyone witness his strength for themselves, Gilgamesh no longer had any intention of entertaining rivals or engaging in duels, as he believed that his strength would deter most who were interested in ending his life. Your father must be very proud of your great achievement, I'm sure he'll summon you soon upon hearing of your personal accomplishments. Simon said with a wide smile, but Gilgamesh wasn't interested in meeting a figure who should consider him a father. I don't remember having a father, so I'm not interested in a conversation with someone like him. Since I want nothing and need nothing from him, I'd rather travel the world and live on a farm. Gilgamesh said this suddenly but then retracted and said, in a palace away from all annoying people, yes, that's what I should do. Of course, Simon believed that money was important, and that was something Gilgamesh didn't have. Unaware that he could make money just by breathing, and that he stored precious jewels, diamonds, gold, and many other things in his gate of Babylon that he could auction or sell to get money. Come to think of it, it would be good to get in touch with an auction house and start one myself. I'd name it Uruk, Uruk Auction Houses. Gilgamesh said, suddenly thinking of something. Simon closed his eyes and said nothing more. From finding a wife to having an auction house in his name, Prince Gilgamesh began to drift back and forth as if his life were too short to decide what to do. Simon, tomorrow, bring me the names of the auction houses in the capital, from the wealthiest and most influential to the poorest. We could make a lot of money and expand our influence worldwide. Gilgamesh looked out of the carriage window and smiled slightly. Chapter 15, An Unexpected Visit. No one should disturb me until dinner time, if possible, I'd like to eat in my room. Gilgamesh said as he entered his only sanctuary away from the world. Upon hearing Gilgamesh's wishes, Simon nodded and said, I'll inform the butler. See you tomorrow, my prince. As he closed the door, Gilgamesh walked in silence slowly toward the bed, lay down, and sighed deeply. He had done something that would likely reach every corner of the central continent, hoping that the usual problems he faced would disappear as a result. A few hours later, Gilgamesh found himself in a dream. He was witnessing one of the many battles he had fought in his revolution to establish human dominance over the gods. But what was curious was that after that, cold waters flooded the surroundings of his dreams, imprisoning his entire body, and a vague scene from his first life appeared right before him. That day when he died at the hands of a beast while saving someone else. If you were to ask him now, he wasn't regretful, in fact, he never was. He always took responsibility for his actions and responded with complete honesty to his most human desires. Since the first time he died, those memories had been slowly erased, there was nothing left of them in his new life as Gilgamesh, and he found it hard to believe that this could be just a dream since there was nothing from his first life that he regretted. What is this? Lowering his gaze, he felt a little disoriented as he saw the body of a child he had completely forgotten, and upon seeing it, the memories of that intense battle with that rabid creature were so vivid that he clenched his teeth with uncontrollable fury. Who dares to play with my memories? Those were Gilgamesh's first words upon seeing himself in his first human body, recalling the helplessness of dying in the claws of a creature and feeling that pain that had invaded him as he bled on the ground filled him with rage. Never before had he experienced such dreams in all the years he had lived as Gilgamesh. So, he immediately linked this event to an external source of power. He couldn't even remember his own face, the disfigured face of his first life in that battle he unfortunately lost. He had never lived with regrets before, so there was no way he could feel any kind of sorrow for his failures and defeats. With all his strength, he tried to wake up or move, swearing that whoever was behind all this would die by his own hands and be erased from any reality. He could feel his memories fading, something akin to being chained by a mysterious power that he could detect, so he knew what was happening. Kneeling in a white world, he remained motionless, not moving a single muscle, still clenching his teeth so tightly that they began to crack. Just as he was about to slit his throat in an attempt to die and awaken in his own reality, his numb senses detected a strange person in this white world. The features of the person's face were almost non-existent, except for a huge mocking smile. No other feature caught his attention enough to leave any impression. Immediately, Gilgamesh catalogued him as the culprit of what was happening to him, so he looked at him without any emotion on his face, as if this being who had visited him were just another insect he had encountered throughout his life. That charismatic aura of that being Gilgamesh had sensed in divine beings like God's messengers or even the gods themselves who communicated with him. A damn god! Well, it seems this is the first time we've met. Greetings, Aya. My name is Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's calm gaze showed no fear, depression, or full of thoughts of doubt. His eyes, still fixed on this being with a neutral voice, didn't waver, as if learning every detail of this being would give him some advantage in what was happening to him. Gilgamesh? I'm sure that's your second name. No matter what you call me, what matters here are the words that will come out of your damn mouth before I decide what I'll do from now on. A bloody tone overflowed in Gilgamesh's words, as if he had seen all the intentions of this being. I didn't expect any less from you, you adapted in just a few seconds. Gilgamesh smiled openly, without considering for a second the current appearance of his body. What is a god doing visiting my dreams? I'm impressed that you recognized me. It's no wonder you're the killer of gods, the one who was once the emperor of humanity. I see, in this world, there are indeed gods with such authority. I wonder where you hide and what your twisted desires are. Gilgamesh's last action would be to trust a god. In fact, if he had the chance, he would have torn this figure apart using all his strength. Of course, you better than anyone know the gods since you're a child of them, or rather a tool. Yes, but I am different from the ones you know. I am one of the gods in this world, and my name is Hitagami, the human god. God of humanity. Gilgamesh mocked as if he had heard the biggest joke of his life, and a thick murderous intent emanated from his body. That chilling golden aura was released without reservation, and his words were as cold as if they belonged to death itself. If you know me, you must know that I killed all authority of the gods and humans, so you must have a lot of confidence to appear before me with such audacity and thoughts of superiority. Of course, I expected that reaction. But you must listen to me. I have no authority in the human world. In fact, my existence cannot enter the world where you are now, Hitagami said with a wide, arrogant smile. That changes things. Gilgamesh muttered to himself. What changes things? What do you mean? It's not relevant. I know a lot about you, I've been watching you since you woke up in this world, and the things you've accomplished are very impressive. You've had a life filled with blood, so it's only normal that in this life, you live more peacefully. I know your only desires are to live as a human, so I can protect you. Hitagami extended his hands as if he had control of the conversation. Protect me? I don't need any being, let alone a god, to protect me. You've already exposed your damn face by trying to intimidate me using my body from my first life before my death as a means to oppress me, but I want you to know that in any of my lives, I've lived and died as someone much better than a god. Gilgamesh was slowly regaining his senses, reclaiming full control of his body. Don't get worked up, in the future, you might have problems with a particular person, so I came to talk to you. Hitagami wasn't intimidated by Gilgamesh's words and continued speaking as if they were on good terms. Any problem I have, in this life or any other, I will take it upon myself to solve, regardless of whether my death is at stake. There is nothing in this world that can stop me, including you. But I am on your side. Gilgamesh smiled. Indeed, this god was a fool to think that he, Gilgamesh, would trust a god in all his words. I want to help you, but with everything you've told me, you've made it difficult. But well, in any case, I'll just give you advice. I don't need it, I don't need anything from the gods. Gilgamesh was getting angrier by the moment. His hands and teeth were so tightly clenched that if he had the chance, he would have broken free. Whether you follow my words or not is entirely up to you, Hitagami said with a wide smile. There is a dragon god who is as strong as you in the human world. In fact, it is the last living god that has influence in the world you live in and has the power to destroy everything with just one attack of its maximum power. The affairs of this world are not my concern, I already fought my war and won it. So the last thing I'll do in this world is go around killing gods as if I had a deep grudge against them. Gilgamesh's response was resolute and filled with his character. He was getting closer and closer to regaining full control of his body. This is not a matter of humiliation, we are in an astral place, so it's natural that your first body reflects your soul. I just want to tell you that your future wife may be in danger from a certain peculiar person who can conspire with a certain dragon god to end your life. Hitagami smiled broadly, waiting for a response. Have you heard me? Whoever may become my wife will be in danger. Hitagami widened his eyes upon seeing a golden aura shine in this place. In just a few seconds, that golden light completely illuminated Gilgamesh's body, and he stood up. It seems that my life won't be so peaceful in this world because of you. If you hadn't intervened in my life, someone else might have killed you. What are you saying? Come on, Aya. I told you, my name is Gilgamesh. As if Gilgamesh's words had authority, his body, the body of his previous life, slowly transformed into that of the adult Gilgamesh, covered in golden armor. My name is Gilgamesh, Emperor of Humanity, King of Heroes. I swear to you, if I have the chance, I will go and kill you. No one has ever dared to mess with me in this way. You, cursed god, I will erase you from this world no matter where you hide. Gilgamesh raised his right hand, and this made Hitagami completely change his expression. Then you must be ready to lose your greatest treasure in this world, Gilgamesh. Hitagami shouted with a deeply strange voice. However, before Hitagami could say more, Gilgamesh pierced his heart, and his consciousness slowly faded away. Next time, I will find you, human god. Who? Gilgamesh woke up again in his room, his enraged expression slowly calming down, and he muttered, my strength must recover to its maximum level as soon as possible, as that would prevent unexpected visits. Chapter 16, The Nobility. The human god tried to control Gilgamesh to kill the dragon god who still roamed in the human world. In normal circumstances, he would have assessed this so-called dragon god and fought with him to see how strong a god was in this world. But there was something Gilgamesh noticed as soon as Hitagami started speaking to him, and that was how deceitful, envious, fearful, and controlling he was as a god. Being closer to the gods than any other human in the world, he knew how they behaved and what the fundamentals of their creation were. Hitagami represented the worst humanity could offer, and Gilgamesh noticed that as soon as he heard his dirty words. As a god who was essentially trash, he still couldn't understand why he was so interested in eliminating the dragon god. To have set himself this goal, he must have read fragments of his memory as the King of Uruk and the future Emperor of Humanity, so because of this, he knows about his hatred for the gods. Just this is admirable since Hitagami introduced himself as a god, knowing the contempt he would earn from Gilgamesh. Still, he took the risk and came out losing in a way he probably expected. Although he is a god, he seems to be limited by certain aspects, and his behavior is solely based on controlling people for his personal gain. In this aspect, he must have the ability to see the future timelines and use them for his benefit. But people as strong as the dragon god and him were limited to observe, wait, see, and make a decision. He must have been very desperate because of my presence in this world. Can I somehow see my future? It's unlikely, I have numerous blessings from more powerful gods, and this may have been my only chance since it would be impossible for me to do it in the future. Gilgamesh's words were true, as Hitagami acted very hastily, and the cards he had at his disposal to handle what would happen next were few. Controlling someone like Gilgamesh was impossible, as from the moment he saw him, he felt all that trash that normal humans couldn't see, no matter how strong they were. Perhaps Hitagami thought that humiliating Gilgamesh with the appearance of his first life would break something inside him or make him feel vulnerable. The truth is that now he is and will always be Gilgamesh, which set him apart from others. There were no regrets, memories of his past life affecting him, or longings. He lived his life as Gilgamesh and died as the Emperor of Humanity, leading a revolution against all the gods, something none of them could have taken as far as he did. Therefore, showing him a body he barely remembered was useless, as his soul had been transformed into that of a divine being. Regardless of whether he was in the body of an old man, a woman, or a drunkard, he was still Gilgamesh, and no one could change that. Thinking that the human god of this world would be so foolish. Still, my life might become a bit more exciting now that he can send his avatars to hunt me down, as it was in the war I started, said Gilgamesh as he pondered what to do next. In his previous life, as the Emperor of Humanity, the gods, upon seeing the revolution of all humans, created creatures called the Eyes of God, which were essentially the gods' first creations to discipline humans. However, all these creatures were eliminated after a war that united millions of people worldwide. Here, in this new world, Gilgamesh did not know the extent of what the human god could do, so by then, he had to be prepared and know what to do to make everything more exciting. He walked to the dining room for dinner. The place he lived in was not the Silver Palace, but a residence connected to the palace, not far from where his father lived. The reason he lived in such a place could be many. Perhaps his mother had an unwanted prince for the king, such things often happened. Or it could be simply that, as a prince, he needed to be ready in case he was required to inherit the throne from his father. That didn't matter, Gilgamesh didn't need a defective throne in this life. So with these thoughts, he arrived at the dining room where 2 guards guarded the entrance. "Welcome, Prince. Your sister, Princess Ariel, is waiting for you at the table." "Very well, an unexpected surprise." Gilgamesh happily opened the door and there he saw his human sister, Princess Ariel, who had hair as golden as his own. "You're here, Gilgamesh. What took you so long?" Ariel treated her brother with great respect. After all, the memories she had of him were as close as a part of her. "Well, I unexpectedly had an unwanted visitor while sleeping, so I could only come now. By the way, sister, what do I owe the pleasure of your visit?" Gilgamesh had seen everything about Ariel, and he could say with certainty that she loved him. After looking at her for a few more seconds, he felt a little strange because he had never had sisters. Besides his mother, there was no one else who gave him the love of family. That kind of feeling was very strange, but since he had a sister, he would take care of her. "It must have been tough for you to contain yourself all these years. It was still surprising that you could become a sword king at the age of 10, but knowing how incredible you were, it wasn't a surprise." Ariel smiled at Gilgamesh, but this was actually a surprise filled with pity. "It seems that the past still imprisons you, sister. Tell me, who was I in your memories?" Gilgamesh, with a natural, sweet and charismatic tone, directed this simple question to his sister. "Let me think." Princess Ariel was surprised to see her brother's maturity. After spending years locked away, not wanting to see anyone, she knew that somehow he had overcome the past. So she said, "You were incredible in magic, talented enough to defy any logic. So good with a sword that there was no instructor capable of teaching you since you mastered everything after just one look. If it weren't for the envy of those born with below-average talent, they wouldn't have made those comments. Actually, it doesn't matter. I'm glad you took a step forward." Ariel stopped when her words were getting to a sensitive topic, so she shook her head and ate with a happy smile. Seeing Ariel's reserved tone, Gilgamesh understood the whole truth without delving further into the past. What happened to the previous owner of his body was something sad that often occurred because it was something that could not be controlled. As he had come to understand, the former Gilgamesh, possessing the future Gilgamesh's abilities, was a talent in anything he did. Over time, he was seen negatively by everyone, teachers, instructors, mages, and even friends. Envy turned people away from learning anything from Gilgamesh, and with the death of his mother, everything in his world came to an end. He had no one else to confide in about his sorrows, so he ended up locking himself in his room with no desire to move forward. Still, his talent was so great that it was seen as a threat as the current king's succession drew near. Everyone had the same question: if we let him grow even more, how strong will he become by the time Gilgamesh decides to take his father's throne? It was foolish, but that was politics. Gilgamesh knew that maybe his mother was killed because of the talented son she had given to the king. No one could afford to have royalty with so much power in their ranks, something that could possibly disrupt the balance of the kingdom. "Since they kidnapped us, I decided to change. Becoming a sword king by killing another was a message to appease the faction that acted to take my life," Gilgamesh said as he sliced through his steak on his plate. "You knew?" Ariel asked, surprised. Given that Gilgamesh was her primary source of information, her knowledge was likely limited. One would have to be a complete fool not to know something like that, wouldn't they, sister? Gilgamesh smiled strangely, growing more amused by the moment. All the royalty in this country was incredibly repulsive, which didn't exempt his sister, but she was tolerable. There might not be much to focus on with Ariel, but she certainly had a dark undertone beneath her sweet and morally presentable words. The real Ariel was hidden beneath the standards that her entire faction demanded of her, which genuinely displeased Gilgamesh. But he didn't care about those tastes and behaviors, so after finishing his dinner, he told his sister, "You can sleep in my room this time. It's already night, and you should rest because lately, assassination attempts are becoming more frequent, and you are not beyond their reach." Chapter 17, Auction House. "You're right about that." After Ariel's surprise turned into deeper thoughts, she smiled and said, our older brother is obsessed with our father's throne, that's no surprise. This time it was you, tomorrow or perhaps in a few years, it might be me who becomes the target of assassination. Ariel spoke these words in a calm tone, as if it were the fate she had been dealt. She certainly had her dark tendencies, something that characterized her as a noble in this morally corrupt country in Gilgamesh's eyes. That's precisely why he didn't desire this kingdom, as acquiring it would mean wiping out most of the nobility, leaving very few standing. The bloodshed would be so immense that his legacy in this world would be tarnished, as very few understood what went on behind the noble facade they all put up. But don't worry, I won't die so easily, so I'll retire after dessert. Ariel insisted, concerned that her faction might involve her brother in the war for the throne of this kingdom. Gilgamesh was a master at reading people, knowing their deep secrets with just one look. It wasn't that he could read memories or see into the future, on the contrary, he judged a person based on their actions and whether what they said was true. This strange ability of his told him what kind of person he was dealing with. In the past, Gilgamesh had eliminated those he believed would be a problem for his reign and drew his own conclusions through this observation. So, after finishing his drink, he said, I'm not making a request, sister. If I tell you to stay here, you must do so, period. If you disobey my orders, I won't bother protecting you. Ariel, who had a smile on her face, froze. She looked into Gilgamesh's eyes, and the image of the little brother she remembered disappeared beneath his now cold gaze. She knew that she was now in the presence of a completely different Gilgamesh, and if she didn't satisfy her brother's desires, he would pay her no more attention from this point onward. She didn't understand it, but she nodded without the possibility of saying a single word. What would terrify most filled her with delight, something she unsuccessfully tried to suppress beneath her eyes. Well, I have something to attend to, so you can sleep wherever you like. Gilgamesh waved his hand and left the dining room, his cheerful demeanor fading into the slightly dim corridor. The presence of guards had diminished, so much so that there were only a few in the hallway. Gilgamesh smiled at this and said, I want the names of all the guards who aren't present. Bring them to my room when you're ready. If they can't handle that task, they better not appear before my sight tomorrow morning. Yes. Yes, Prince Gilgamesh. The guard who seemed the most nervous felt death staring at him and nodded before hurrying off to the other hallway. Prince Gilgamesh, what's the matter? A guard who came with Ariel asked. He seemed different, likely part of her faction. Prevent my sister from leaving the mansion. It seems we will have visitors tonight, Gilgamesh said. Upon hearing those words, the guard's eyes widened, but after understanding the message, he nodded and said, Don't worry, Prince. I will ensure Princess Ariel's protection with my life. Gilgamesh nodded and walked towards the mansion's second floor. Once he had disappeared, Ariel's guard let out a heavy sigh and muttered, He's a damn demon, unlike his sister. In an unknown location within the capital of the Azura Kingdom. Humph. I can't believe Elian spared trash like Prince Gilgamesh. Now everyone calls him the youngest Sword King. I wonder how he survived after I poisoned him. Damn that bastard. That boy is a disgrace to the future of this kingdom. I must kill him, and this time, do it so thoroughly that not even his corpse remains intact. The voice of a fat, balding elderly man dressed in lavish clothing barked like a dog as he beat a woman writhing on the ground. My lord Darius, Ariel went to visit her brother Gilgamesh. Should we kill them both tonight? A voice from the darkness spoke after the fat old man paused, exhausted. Wasn't he supposed to have died a long time ago from the poison we've been administering? Oh, he was certainly supposed to die, but that assassination attempt failed too. How could a boy who never leaves his room become a damn sword king? It's like he's living in a damn dream, so we must kill him as soon as possible, Darius said, his saliva flying everywhere as he spoke. We must prepare. When he's asleep, he and his sister, Princess Ariel, must be killed. It must be quick and precise, no room for mistakes. Darius was eager to kill Gilgamesh since he had heard from a certain source that with every passing second, that bastard was getting stronger. So, this was his only opportunity to kill him, as in the future, it would be impossible to do so through his own means. Everyone will die tonight, and only then will I be able to sleep soundly. Yes, I must do it today, no matter the cost. Darius looked at the moonlight with a disgusting, sinister smile on his lips. It seems like it was a good idea to have my sister stay in my room. Are these guys so foolish as to ignore my warning? Gilgamesh wondered to himself as he closed his eyes. He had observed the stars and knew that one of Hitagama's apostles was in the Azura kingdom. Following the sequence of events about to unfold tonight, he was certain that the same person who had acted to kill him before was about to do so once more. If he was lucky, that same person might be a follower of the human god. After the mansion had calmed down, Gilgamesh no longer feigned ignorance. He walked through the dark corridors and closed his eyes as he tried to concentrate. Every god had their emissary in the human world. This had happened even with him, who had once been an apostle to the human world to bring with him the words of the gods. Although this world was very different, the gods remained the same when it came to the human god. If history repeated itself, he would have to embark on a path to seek out that dragon god if he couldn't obtain information from the emissaries of the human god to end his life. Gilgamesh knew that this god could see the future, so he understood perfectly what he had to do to change certain outcomes in history. Still, the path he took remained the same no matter how many times it happened. Now, being able to kill someone like Gilgamesh, who had been through wars as long as an entire winter, he knew was a foolish decision. But he matched wits with the human god and understood that the human god believed this to be one of his best opportunities to do so. After all, the only thing he would lose would be a puppet he could replace as many times as he wanted. In the past, Gilgamesh had led the gods to a future they never would have expected. He united the entire human world against them, so this time would be child's play. This time will be very different. Gilgamesh smiled as his eyes gleamed with intensity in the darkness of the night. Chapter 18, Are you arrogant or stupid? Gilgamesh stood in the hallway, his nostrils detecting a foul stench of sweat, and he knew they had arrived. 1. 3. 12. 15. That's 15 assassins, quite a sizable number. I'm glad they didn't underestimate me, but they will all die in this place and won't have the honor of keeping their bodies intact for that. In the darkness, several figures with twin daggers in their hands stared at Gilgamesh with murderous intent. They were all in a deceptive combat formation, as they only needed to make one cut to the Prince Gilgamesh to kill him. That's why they were not afraid to fight a Sword King, as even someone with his power could not stop the effect of the potent poison coursing through the daggers of all the figures looking at Gilgamesh with intense eyes. I originally thought my message got through to all of you loud and clear, but it seems it didn't. What a shame, this really is a shame because now you all will have to die, and it won't be by my hands. In Gilgamesh's eyes, these third-rate assassins would not even be enough to get close to him, but he found it amusing how worms dared to wish for his life in this manner. Since he arrived in this world, he had developed a certain fondness for the peculiar way things worked. In his previous life, he was an absolute king, and there was no one who wished to kill him because his own people knew it was futile to entertain such a grand idea that would never happen. Here, on the other hand, it was very different because no one understood Gilgamesh's true strength. Target confirmed. A man declared, immediately hurling several poisoned darts towards Gilgamesh's body. Interesting. Behind Gilgamesh, a ripple of golden light flashed, and within seconds, a spear flew at such incredible speed that none of the assassins could react in time. Boom! The spear, as if it had a life of its own, moved forward and pierced through the chest of the first assassin rushing towards Gilgamesh. It was natural that this assassin did not anticipate a long-distance attack from Gilgamesh. After all, he was a swordsman with no sword in hand, and they were watching him closely, prepared to employ any tactic. Still, no one expected this attack, so different from what they had heard. Are you already dead? I had planned to make you suffer a bit more, but well, trash will always be trash. After saying this, more golden circles appeared behind Gilgamesh, where the tips of swords and spears emerged. Defensive formation. The assassins right in front of him panicked, and they all moved towards him, attempting to dodge or plan to evade the attacks coming their way. But all of this was futile, as the projectiles passing through the gate formed bright ripples in the empty air as they instantly appeared, and these were launched with such force and speed that they couldn't be perceived by these simple assassins. Boom! 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 Gilgamesh calmly watched the mutilation of these assassins, step by step walking towards them as swords and spears impaled their bodies. Blood soon splattered across the hallway, some walls crumbled, and everyone attempting to approach met a miserable end. Ah! Miserable screams echoed through the hallway, and in the darkness, which was the sole witness to this brutal massacre, the assassins could do nothing against Gilgamesh's power. What pathetic assassins! They couldn't even get close to my body, Gilgamesh said as he stopped after the blood had stained the floor. From the golden ripples, the tip of his Inkiju, his most trusted noble phantasm, appeared stealthily, and just at this moment, a cold voice emerged behind Gilgamesh, "I've got you." Like two sharp fangs seeking their prey, the edges of two daggers appeared behind Gilgamesh, held by a feminine figure that seemed to have hidden in the darkness and waited long enough to strike accurately. It was a pity that Gilgamesh's Inkiju moved faster than the attacker in the darkness, and the chain-like tendrils quickly wrapped around the female's body that remained alive. The female assassin in this case had barely any clothing on her body, and her gaze seemed as vacant as if she were dead. Gilgamesh frowned, knowing that extracting information from this woman would be very complicated, but he still had to make an attempt. Upon closer inspection, Gilgamesh saw her complete appearance and discovered that she was a petite and slender woman with dark, tentacle-like hair. She had golden pupils, dark eyelids, and an impassive expression. Most of her body was exposed, with only her private parts covered. Her chest was connected to something that wrapped around her neck, and she also wore a pair of boots. She still tried to move, now showing panic in her eyes, but it was impossible to escape Gilgamesh's grasp, so he said, "Resistance is futile. You'll not only hurt yourself but also waste your energy." Grr. A fierce growl escaped from the woman's mouth, and after a few minutes, she stopped moving. "What is your title?" Gilgamesh asked as the swords that had emerged from the gate of Babylon disappeared from the floor. "Can't you hear me?" Gilgamesh asked once more as the chains extended with increasing force in 4 different directions. "Night's Eye Crow. You dared to come here with such confidence that now all that awaits you is a slow and painful death. But you can change things, you still have much life ahead of you, so you can redirect your path as there is no turning back." The smell of blood filled the place, and Simon, along with several guards, approached, their eyes widening when they saw all the blood and mutilated corpses on the floor. "Prince, how is she?" Simon had no words, so he asked the first thing that came to mind. Gilgamesh extended his hand and said, "Guard, be silent and observe. I don't want anyone to speak. I can heal all your wounds, make the impossible possible. Ask me a wish, and I can grant you whatever you desire. I can kill whoever your enemy may be, give you another name and life, so just tell me a name." Gilgamesh's words were soft, his charismatic tone filled with seriousness was sincere. He was not lying, and if the woman in front of him told him the truth, he would protect her even if it meant destroying half of this kingdom. "No one is my rival, so you must know how far I can go to fulfill my words. Even if it's the very king who ordered my death, you can trust me as I will ensure to eliminate the problem at its root." Gilgamesh sighed, and several golden ripples appeared behind him, from which several slender swords emerged, all pointing towards the female assassin with the title Night's Eye Crow. "You have only 1 minute before you die. If you answer my question, I am willing to take you as part of my family and give you a new life. Listen very carefully, it's highly likely that the man who sent you to this place is the puppet of a very evil man. Let me remove him from this world and give a warning to all those nobles who believe they cannot be touched. Dar. Da. Darius. Chapter 19, A Name. Darius Silvaganius. Impossible, the Prime Minister of the Azura Kingdom would never order something so vile. Simon shouted, causing everyone to fall silent and bow their heads. A deathly silence enveloped the surroundings, making every passing second without anyone saying anything feel heavier. Gilgamesh's ripples disappeared one by one, leaving only the chains still holding the female assassin. "Night's Eye Crow, a woman who only knows murder. You will be under my protection, and no being will dare to touch you without my authority. So long as you remain by my side, no man or god will dream of harming you." Gilgamesh's words carried the authority of a king, a monarch who had ruled the heavens and the earth, lived through wars, and slaughtered enemies. Everyone, regardless of who they were, accepted these words in silence, regardless of the real meaning behind them. Even Simon, who had been about to protest, remained silent, fearing being erased from this world. "Now, tell me, woman, what is your desire?" Gilgamesh asked as he looked into the eyes of the assassin who had sought to kill him just moments ago. No other girl should suffer. Night's Eye Crow, ever since she was sold to that horrible man, knew that there was no path for her except death, torture, and abuse. To be honest, she had stopped feeling emotions. She had hidden so much of what she felt that she only did what she was ordered without resistance. Since she was so tainted and weak that she couldn't take her own life, her existence had eventually become involved in numerous noble assassinations. What comforted her about all her murders was that they were nobles, the disgusting and twisted nobles she despised so much. Now that she thought about it, that was the real reason she continued to endure her life, as killing nobles reduced the number of people causing suffering to others. Done, no one who shouldn't suffer today will die, Gilgamesh said as the golden chains withdrew from Night's Eye Crow's body, and she fell to the ground, powerless. Her joints were broken, so she couldn't move even if she wanted to. Simon approached Gilgamesh and asked with a respectful salute, "My lord, what do you plan to do now?" "Kill!" Gilgamesh exclaimed as a sword materialized in his hand, and with a single sweep, the wall on one side shattered. Boom! The strong wind lifted the debris, sending it flying and creating a huge hole in Gilgamesh's mansion, revealing a beautiful moon in the sky. But right now, everyone was terrified of what was about to happen. "My lord, I urge you to reconsider what you are about to do, as this will paralyze the kingdom. Killing a prime minister is not something you can do with such freedom. I advise you to discuss this delicate matter with your father, the king." Simon, as Gilgamesh's advisor and personal guard, presented the best course of action he could think of to resolve this issue. In common sense, it's easy to understand that killing the prime minister could be considered treason. Even the mere thought of it would shake the entire kingdom, especially if they learn that one of the princes was the perpetrator. But of course, Gilgamesh doesn't care about that. What comforts him now is knowing that he will kill a rat that dared to target him with such confidence. "I like it even more now." Gilgamesh showed a smile illuminated by the moonlight and said arrogantly, "I like to kill in the moonlight because I share tastes with those who want to kill me. I prefer to kill this way so that everyone understands that if they anger me, I will take this kingdom as easily as their lives." After saying this, Gilgamesh licked his lips, and a part of his armor appeared in his hands. He looked at Simon and said, "Tell me where the Prime Minister lives, and I want you to take care of things here. Also, I want you to protect this woman who is under my protection." Night's Eye Crow remained silent, gazing at the moon while the warm blood still trickled across the floor towards her. "Prince, reconsider." Simon met Gilgamesh's gaze and eventually told him Darius's address. Then, he looked at the woman on the ground and picked her up. "Very well, when you're done here, I want you to get going because you need to handle some things that will happen at the Prime Minister's mansion." After saying this, Gilgamesh leaped from the top of the building and flew through the sky at a speed that few could perceive. Simon and everyone who saw Gilgamesh fly shivered. As knights, they had seen winds and waves raging, and they had even been in life-or-death battles with magical beasts. However, they had never before witnessed a magician or knight flying. The only beings that flew were animals and creatures with wings, not humans. After the day when Gilgamesh had been kidnapped, all the knights guarding the mansion, especially Simon, the personal guard of the third prince, knew that nothing could instill fear in Gilgamesh. The image of a 10-year-old licking his lips after killing more than 10 assassins who sought to kill him filled them with a profound sense of strangeness. At that moment, they imagined that Gilgamesh could stand on mountains of bones and blood without flinching. When they heard that the third prince was going after the head of Prime Minister Darius, they all fell silent and pretended not to hear. The guards behind Simon were at a loss for words. With the new turn of events, even if they wanted to intervene, it was impossible to stop the third prince now. Simon, who had regained his composure, said, "What are you waiting for? Search the mansion for other assassins and make sure Princess Ariel is safe. Keep your mouth shut, and nothing of what you heard today will come to light. Otherwise, I will personally take care of killing every one of you." "Understood, Sir Simon." The knights had a very peaceful life and had no desire to get involved in what was about to happen. After receiving their orders, they made sure the assassins were dead before continuing to search the mansion. Chapter 20, The Red Knight. "How old is that girl from the Boreas family in Fito?" "She would be 8 years old this year, my lord, but it would be very troublesome to snatch her from the hands of a family like the Boreas who are very well protected," replied the butler standing beside Darius. "We must find a way to kidnap her. I am willing to pay a generous reward for her. It must be quite delicious to have my claws on such a delicacy. Besides, I managed to kidnap Prince Gilgamesh. It's a pity he didn't die, it would have saved me all these problems." Darius was very upset, but what comforted him was the thought that soon he would hear the news that this child had been murdered. He was only waiting for that moment with a glass of wine in his hand, savoring his masterpiece. However, just as he was dreaming of how incredible the days ahead would be, a loud explosion that shook the mansion where he was made Darius furious, and he asked, "What was that sound?" "Boom! Boom! Boom! I will go check." The butler's expression changed, and he quickly ran to the main door when once again a powerful explosion rocked the ground and the foundations of the mansion. It's a pity to be a night guard for that old fat man. I'd rather be out in the field killing beasts than living here, guarding a door that no one would dare to enter. Don't even get me started. At least here, we won't be killed by a beast. A knight in full armor standing nearby scoffed after thinking about their situation more deeply. Tap tap. Tap tap. At that moment, a series of footsteps were heard not far away, and the two guards turned their attention toward the unknown figure. Who are you? This is the private property of the Prime Minister. Get out of here before we arrest you for trespassing. One of the guards shouted with a powerful voice, as these things happened from time to time. Gilgamesh walked calmly forward, his gaze settled on the two guards, and after assessing their strength, he looked away as if these two were nothing to him. The guards furrowed their brows, and one of them drew his sword, preparing as this seemed to be an unexpected situation. At that moment, a raspy voice came from behind them, saying, "Step aside, you are no match for this man." "Captain!" The guards, who saw the expression on their captain's face, froze. They had never seen their powerful captain so nervous before. Immediately, the two guards moved to the rear, and the one who hadn't unsheathed his sword did so. The smell of blood was now present, and a sense of impending death overcame them. "Identify yourself!" roared the guard, unleashing the fear that had built up inside him. "My name is Gilgamesh, so anyone who stands in my way will die." "If you're Gilgamesh, I'm the king, you damn son of a bitch." As if he were a beast fighting for survival, the captain rushed toward Gilgamesh and swung his sword with terrifying force. Gilgamesh didn't try to dodge, instead, he held the man's sword with his right hand. Although Darius's security captain could level a field, he couldn't move Gilgamesh, who was just a child. At this moment, everyone felt fear, as behind Gilgamesh, several ripples appeared, and from them emerged several golden swords. "Prince Gilgamesh, how is it that you are here?" The leader of the knights who had attacked Gilgamesh froze upon seeing his face and confirming that he was the fourth prince. "Do you still dare to ask me questions?" Gilgamesh, with an icy expression, looked at this man and the knights behind him. "Not to mention the trash in this mansion, all of you who have dared to stand in my way will die." After uttering these words, Gilgamesh snapped his fingers, and the swords in the golden ripples shot out, piercing through the body of the captain in front of him. Unable to move, the swords turned this man's body into a curtain of blood. "It can't be!" The guards behind them fell on their backs, frightened and not knowing what to do when witnessing the death of an unranked sword king. "What do we do?" Gilgamesh continued walking, his blood-stained face looking at these people. He stopped at a certain distance and asked, "Is Darius in the mansion, yes or no?" "Yes, Prince Gilgamesh, the Prime Minister is in the mansion." "Then die!" Boom! Boom! Two deafening roars echoed before Gilgamesh's swords ended the lives of these knights. If they follow his enemy, they must all die without exception. Gilgamesh didn't know how many enemies were in this place or how many he had to kill, but anything that moved would be murdered, and only then would he be at peace. These guards are known to come from noble families, so if they are in this place, they are of utmost importance to Darius, making them more than just enemies. Furthermore, Gilgamesh doesn't mind killing, as it is like a second nature to him. "We're under attack, alert the guards." Several rigid figures approached, but as soon as they were a few meters away from Gilgamesh, they were killed. However, it seemed that no one could comprehend the gravity of the situation. Without warning, the Prime Minister's mansion was in chaos that no one had foreseen. Gilgamesh began to massacre all those who stood in his way on his quest to find one man. Chapter 21, Enemies as Friends. At that moment, on the second floor of the Prime Minister's residence, Darius Silvaganius was in shock. Even the butler who had gone to see what was happening was surprised. Only a few managed to remain calm, but all of them who had been confident against a single enemy were eliminated within seconds. On the other hand, some servants who witnessed the massacre and those golden ripples felt that this was a natural flow of events. The time had come for the Prime Minister to pay for all the atrocities he had committed, so with maniacal smiles, those who did not belong to the mansion's guard stepped aside. Everyone had heard rumors that Prince Gilgamesh was incredibly powerful, but they had felt that no matter how powerful he was, it would be challenging to engage in battle with his short stature, even if he was a sword king. However, after witnessing this carnage, no one would forget the figure of Prince Gilgamesh. Boom! Two explosions echoed at the main entrance of the mansion. Two of the guards who had arrived at the scene were like two meteors crashing into the walls as they were expelled by Gilgamesh, creating two enormous holes. Who is doing all this? Many of the guards approaching to investigate froze as they saw golden ripples appear in the air, expelling golden swords that ultimately pierced the bodies of other guards running from the scene. Don't kill me, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you, Prince Gilgamesh. Boom. Many people were horrified as they saw heads roll, especially those considered the strongest in their group. One of the guards who had formed a formation at the mansion's entrance shouted upon seeing a figure enter, "It's Prince Gilgamesh." Suddenly, everyone saw that figure wearing parts of his golden armor, but these were only his gloves and various accessories on his body. The younger guards couldn't stay still, some dropped their swords, and others knelt on the ground. "My lord, what caused your anger?" asked one guard who was more intelligent than the rest. Gilgamesh noticed his intentions, looked around, and finally said, "I've come to kill a pig hiding in this place. Anyone who stands in my way will die with their head detached from their body." Gilgamesh's words stirred the hearts of everyone present, as they had heard how this young prince had killed a well-known sword king. None of those who hadn't witnessed it believed that this young man had such power, but now, everyone in his presence could only lower their heads and accept that fact. The guard who had asked furrowed his brow, knowing these words were true. However, as a guard of this place, he had a significant commitment to protect it. If he failed, he would die by decapitation for failing in his duty. "My lord, I deeply regret your anger and beg for mercy. None of those present here are guilty of whatever happened. But as guards and royal knights, our duty is to protect the Prime Minister." "Mercy? My enemies show no mercy, so decide very carefully what you want to do. Die alongside a pig who betrayed his humanity or die at my hands. What better honor is there? That leaves me in a difficult situation, Prince Gilgamesh." Whoosh! At that moment, two figures emerged from the darkness, holding sharp daggers, both of them aiming to attack Gilgamesh, one from the front and one from behind. Despite having been beaten before, they had only minor injuries. With a loud noise, a surge of battle energy enhanced the sharpness of the daggers wielded by these two figures rushing toward Gilgamesh. The guard in front said, "It's better for everyone to grab their weapons, we'll die tonight or tomorrow if we can't kill that demon." "But sir, we're talking about Prince Gilgamesh." One guard hesitated at the words he had heard. "We'll pretend we never saw him in the darkness. His death will be attributed to his recklessness in coming to the Prime Minister's mansion." Tension filled the air as these two figures in the darkness headed toward Gilgamesh. Their eyes seemed bloodshot, moving like bullets toward him. "Damn brat, you shouldn't have come to this place alone. Even if you're Prince Gilgamesh, only death awaits you." Boom! At that moment, two double-edged swords appeared in Gilgamesh's hands in the blink of an eye. With astonishing speed, he rotated his body, and his sword struck with such force that the first figure rushing toward him was split in two. Impossible! The pupils of everyone present contracted as they witnessed this chilling scene. Simultaneously, Gilgamesh's Inkija chains emerged from the golden ripples and ensnared the second enemy who was coming head-on. It was then that everyone understood what they were facing. The golden death was right before them. Those who had the strength to move did not, they simply collapsed on the ground, powerless. Fear was the only response to this event, a terrible fear that could not be countered by anything. "You worthless fools, get up and fight." The butler emerged with two hooded figures and saw the bloody scene in front of him in disbelief. One of the mages who had arrived and witnessed the enemy they had to attack cried out, "Song of the Saints of Fire, Lord of Light, grant me power to face whomever my enemies may be." Fire spiral. This was the first time Gilgamesh had faced a mage in this world, so he became more interested in this confrontation. In the next moment, two huge spirals of fire surrounded him, and the temperature rose so high that many others would have died amidst the raging flames. But for Gilgamesh, this was nothing, as his body could withstand astonishing temperatures even without using flames. So, to his eyes, this attack was nothing more than fire swirling around him without causing any harm. The two mages who had appeared were quite impressive, capable of casting king's magic, a level that very few could achieve. However, because their enemy was Gilgamesh, there was nothing they could do to harm him. At that moment, as the fire erupted with great force, a burst of wind emanated from within the fire spiral, dissipating the mage's spell. The strong wind caused by Gilgamesh sent nearby guards flying against the walls, debris was sent flying, and the fire was completely extinguished. The butler, who witnessed this, could only murmur, "This cannot be possible." Chapter 22, Unstoppable. In a single second, the ground beneath Gilgamesh's feet turned into nothing. The attacks of two mages capable of casting king's magic were nothing compared to what royal knights could inflict. A mage capable of casting king's or emperor's magic could unleash these spells at the same level as a knight and would not be inferior to such attacks. Boom! Somewhere at the entrance, the earth shook after Gilgamesh appeared beside the mages who had conjured the fire spell. Was that your strongest blow? The mages, frozen and unsure of what to do, shuddered when they heard that voice. Impossible! The butler, who wanted to say something, was held by the golden chains, and his haughty expression turned into one filled with pain as his joints were put under immense pressure. They are so weak, they can't even kill me when I stand still. In that world, two ripples appeared at the side, and from them emerged two spears that pierced through the heads of the two mages who had been consumed by extreme fear. The chains binding the butler exerted more force, and Gilgamesh, having ended the lives of the two mages, slowly walked towards him. My turn. At the moment those words came out, the chains began to tear apart the butler's four limbs simultaneously. The force was so great that both his bones and muscles started to separate from his body. Ah! You're a demon! Gilgamesh scoffed upon hearing the man's words, and with a snap of his fingers, the man's body was separated into 5 parts. Because this man would die in a matter of seconds, he was no longer of interest to Gilgamesh, who continued ascending the stairs toward his true target. As he walked down the hallway, there was some resistance, but they were all easily dispatched by Gilgamesh using his precious swords. Although he was disgusted by this, he preferred to do it because these were potential formidable enemies, individuals who might have powers worthy of his attention. The sooner he finished, the better. As Gilgamesh approached that room, it seemed that the people around had realized what was happening in the Prime Minister's mansion, so they surrounded the mansion, awaiting orders. You, bitches, must protect me from whoever enters that door. A deeply sinister voice was heard by Gilgamesh, who furrowed his brow. As he approached the door, he sensed 2 weak presences, so he opened the door, and what he saw left him surprised. Those in front were holding 2 knives with their weak hands and frightened expressions, but these were 2 young individuals with brutal injuries on their bodies. At the back of the room, there was a fat man holding a dagger who looked attentively at the one who had opened the door. When he saw who it was, Darius shivered and murmured, "Impossible, you should be dead right now." What's even more incredible is that a prime minister of a country where my Azura family has the highest privilege of existence is being attacked by orders of an old fool like you. Where did you get such pusillanimous courage? Gilgamesh looked at this man with high-quality jewels and shook his head. How foolish you are, Prince Gilgamesh. Even if your father is the king, you are committing treason by entering my mansion in this manner and killing all the innocent guards who were protecting me. Darius Silvaganius showed a triumphant expression as he saw guards arriving from outside his mansion. Gilgamesh laughed at the intentions of this man before him. Then he said while narrowing his eyes, "Do you think those guards outside can save you? Even if all the knights in this kingdom come to your aid, you will die in the worst way possible within my tolerance. Haha, your damned head has turned you into a retard. Just wait for me to kill you in your brother's name. A bastard like you should not be alive for one more day, you cursed usurper." Darius fixed his gaze on the young women holding the daggers and shouted, "Damn bitches, if you don't do something now, I'll take care of killing you myself when this is over. You talk a lot when you're already dead." Gilgamesh, who was standing at the door, appeared beside Darius and held his jaw as he levitated in the air. His heavy body was no obstacle to being lifted off the ground. No. Darius then realized the predicament he had gotten himself into, feeling immediate pain in his stomach. He looked down and saw Gilgamesh's hand effortlessly pulling out his intestines, causing his vision to blur. "Come on, Prime Minister, this is just the beginning." Gilgamesh created several ripples from which chains emerged, holding Darius. Then, more ripples appeared, and numerous swords began to pierce Darius's body. Boom! 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 As the swords began to pierce his body, Darius urinated, and tears kept flowing from his eyes. But no matter how much he pleaded, dozens of swords impaled his body one after another until the blood he lost was so much that the last sword pierced his heart, ending his life. Gilgamesh had lived for a long time. Although he never married and spent most of his life in war, ruling his country, and seeking immortality, he had never created such a masterpiece until now. On the bed, Darius's corpse had been pierced by more than 100 swords belonging to the guards of the mansion who had been killed. "Do you know where the other girls who were slaves of this man are?" Gilgamesh, after staring at Darius's corpse for a while, turned to the girls who were holding the daggers motionless on the side. One of them, who noticed Gilgamesh's expression, nodded while offering her hand to the other girl. They were the newest products purchased by Darius, foreign nobles who had been kidnapped and sold to the man who had just been killed by 100 swords. If you ask them, they were happy that tears had started to flow from their eyes when they felt their torment was gone. Although their scars and traumas had not disappeared and might never do, seeing the man who had ruined their lives die brought them a happiness they had never felt before. Then take me to that place, I will make a decision when we get there. Gilgamesh gave one last look to Darius and smiled. Those swords would serve as a strong warning to both his brother Grabble's faction and the nobles. This kingdom was a cesspool, no different from other kingdoms in this world, but compared to Uruk, this place was a complete disgrace. Although he found sense in all things, from slaves to widows, seeing these scenes filled him with a deep hatred that he hoped to eliminate after this day. If not, he would make sure to give them a strong warning or eliminate them if they were entirely unnecessary. Looking at these girls, Gilgamesh thought that there might be something good for them if they chose to follow him. If that were the case, he wouldn't mind managing their future movements because he had found loyal subordinates willing to go through hell and back with him. The knights had surrounded the place, but leaving would be complicated for others. However, that was nothing for Gilgamesh, who possessed treasures that no one in this world could imagine. Upon arriving at a kind of basement, there were numerous cages and cells with figures huddled in the darkness. They were all females, some of whom would be considered girls by modern standards. Apparently, Darius cultivated them as if they were strawberries to be eaten when they were ready. Others, who were older, seemed to be sick and dying due to severe depression and sadness. When they heard someone descending, their bodies trembled, and they hoped not to be chosen because no one ever returned once they were taken. Chapter 23, Live or Die. The scene before Gilgamesh filled him with disgust, but there was nothing more to it. In life, if one didn't learn to control their emotions and let them control you, they could cause harm to others as well as to themselves. For Gilgamesh, someone so powerful in the world, what would be the result of his anger? Would it be a good outcome if the perpetrator were to die? Yet this could easily be happening in other noble families. Considering this, he could only blame the parents of these affected individuals. It might not entirely be the fault of the parents, and these girls may not have parents or families who cherish them as treasures, but there were so many ways to escape that it was unthinkable to end up living in this hell. Gilgamesh would have tried to get out of this place until the nails on his fingers broke, waiting for the moment to sink his teeth into the neck of the first person who stood in his way. And if he didn't have the strength to do that, biting his own tongue would be enough to win this battle of torture. It wasn't something that represented him now, and it never had. Most likely, he would wait for the moment to take his revenge while enduring all the damage to his body. But since the affected ones were not him, they might have opted for those outcomes worthy of their lives. Descending the stairs, all those cells where girls with scanty clothing and dirty faces were held, saw a figure in parts of golden armor. They all thought it was a noble coming to take them according to their preferences, but no one expected him to be so young. That place is a mess. Gilgamesh shook his head and sighed. Seeing a group of keys on the wall, he took them and said, "Release all the prisoners, remove their chains, and have everyone stand in front of me. Those who can't move, have others drag them, as quickly as possible." "Yes." With a submissive voice, one of the girls took the keys with trembling hands and began to unlock the doors of each cell. One by one, each of the imprisoned girls in this place stood before Gilgamesh, and no one could look him in the eyes out of fear. However, there was one girl who seemed unafraid and dared to stare at him. "What are you going to do to us?" A young woman with golden hair looked Gilgamesh in the eyes. Gilgamesh raised his eyebrows in surprise, then smiled and said, "Now that you're all gathered here, I'll give you two paths to choose from going forward. Either become my property or die in this place." They all shivered upon hearing his words, each interpreting what Gilgamesh meant differently. However, compared to Darius, this young man seemed like a better option. Gilgamesh understood what they were all thinking, so he said, "Don't misunderstand me. Just now, I killed everyone in this mansion. You're the only ones left alive, and I want to get out of here without being discovered." To be honest, he didn't care about being discovered by certain people. All he didn't want was to be bothered and have to continue cleaning up the mess in this kingdom without stopping. Now, he could possibly leave this place without being discovered, but if anyone here survived, the outcome might not be the same. When Gilgamesh voiced his words, he didn't require the bodies of the girls in this place or anything of the sort. What he was looking for was people to be under his ownership, useful in any aspect of his life, and in return, he would give them a better life. Upon closer consideration, all the girls here would have died if it weren't for his intervention. By giving each of them a new life, he was not only fulfilling the request of the woman who had tried to assassinate him tonight but also gaining better cards. He didn't plan anything grand, he just wanted to keep his surroundings clean of trash and not have to personally get involved in every problem life threw at him. Sooner or later, he would have more subordinates who chose to follow him by their own free will, but for now, this was the only way out these girls had ahead of them. Are all of you deaf? They all felt a chill run down their spines. Then, with the moonlight filtering through the small windows in the walls, they saw the blood still dripping from Gilgamesh's hair and realized that he didn't even have red hair but golden. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Gilgamesh Azura, the fourth prince in the line of succession of this filthy kingdom, and the strongest man in the world whom you will have the honor of meeting. Now choose, end your path here, or decide to follow me and see the light of a new day. Gilgamesh smiled, then added, I know what concerns you, but you have my word that nothing in this kingdom will be able to touch the things that belong to me. I will kill anyone who tries to be my enemy, so make your choice. Not wanting to waste any more time in this dark place, Gilgamesh waved his hand, and a massive golden ripple appeared in the large basement. From it emerged a kind of ark with a throne at its center. None of them had imagined something like this, none of them believed that this thing could get them out of this place. But Gilgamesh, with the aura of a ruler, acted as if this action was natural and said, those who want to leave, get on, hold on to whatever you can, and let's get out of this place. With lingering uncertainty in their movements, the girl who seemed more intelligent than the others began to help those who hesitated. She gave everyone the chance to trust, and one by one, they sat beside the throne. Gilgamesh smiled slightly as the 12 girls, women, and teenagers who had been imprisoned in this place climbed aboard. After all, none of them had endured this hellish existence to die, so they decided to place their trust in him, and they all settled onto the magical throne. Hold on to your lives and don't fall off, we'll fly as slowly as possible, Gilgamesh said as the last girl boarded and sat at his feet. This throne of Gilgamesh was a golden and emerald-colored ark, one of his numerous high-tech noble phantasms from Hindu mythology that would make even technologically advanced countries seem insignificant. This ark was powered by a solar crystal, rutilated quartz crystals, which burned mercury as fuel. It defied the laws of physics, traveling at the speed of thought, and could easily surpass speeds that no other aircraft or person could achieve. It had a pilot's seat that could be removed in emergencies, and a control column, unused due to interference with the operation of the Gate of Babylon, placed directly in front. This won't work. Gilgamesh noticed that the grasp of the enslaved girls was weak, so he conjured a golden ripple, and his chain, Inkiju, wrapped around the bodies of all the girls. After that, the ark was controlled from the throne where Gilgamesh sat, and a magical shield condensed around the central area. In the next moment, 2 swords from the golden ripples caused a powerful explosion that destroyed half of Darius's mansion. Then, the ark shot off at speeds never before seen in this world. Only a golden comet suddenly streaked across the sky, eventually disappearing from everyone's sight, leaving behind Darius's mansion in ruins and dozens of corpses scattered everywhere. Chapter 24, Mysteries. Outside Darius's mansion, the world was in chaos. What are they doing? Ragnar roared furiously and looked at all the guards who dared not enter the Prime Minister's mansion. The guards wanted to advance, but it was better to surround the place first to prevent any of the attackers from escaping. Those were the thoughts of everyone since this outcome would bring back the culprits of the attack. Ragnar, as the first and closest to the Prime Minister's mansion, was sent to check what had happened. Lately, attacks had been happening one after another in the kingdom, causing great instability in security and people's trust. Lord Ragnar, the attack began approximately 5 minutes ago. The other noble families near this place have reported hearing loud screams and explosions, but all those sounds ceased when we secured the area, one of the knights who had arrived first said. The situation is critical, we've just received a report that Prince Gilgamesh's mansion was attacked, and the worst part is that Princess Ariel was in the same mansion. Everything seems to indicate that the attacks were coordinated. Follow me immediately, and let's find out what happened in this place. As the Sword Emperor, who was the commander of the Royal Knights, everyone had confidence in him and followed behind Ragnar, keeping their eyes wide open for adversity. A knight who was Ragnar's aide said with a cold expression, Sir, there are records that in the mansion, there is a Sword King, 2 mages capable of wielding king-level magic, and more than 50 royal guards. No need to report it, the guards are here. Ragnar, who had advanced ahead, found numerous corpses on the ground. Their wounds were all very similar, but there was no pattern to suggest that a known technique had been used, so they were currently without clues. They're all dead. In Gilgamesh's mansion, the corpses had been collected, and the blood had been cleaned to the best of their ability, but Simon was worried that Gilgamesh had not yet appeared. The best part of all of this was that Princess Ariel had taken charge of everything in Gilgamesh's absence, which made suspicions about the prince's whereabouts disappear. Boom! At that moment, a sound struck the rear of the mansion right where the rarely visited courtyard was. But this simple sound was enough to send all the guards running to search for any enemies. Simon, who was the quickest, saw Gilgamesh surrounded by many figures and furrowed his brow but didn't ask any questions. "He's back, my lord." Gilgamesh had noticed Simon's presence as he walked towards him and nodded. "Take care of these girls, they are now part of my property, and no one should touch them. Ensure they receive the best treatment and prepare some rooms for them to sleep together." "Understood. There won't be any issues," Simon replied, and quickly summoned some of the mansion's maids. "I'm going to take a shower and then get some rest, handle this for me," Gilgamesh said as he waved his hand and walked away from the scene. "You will all be fine now, don't be afraid and follow me in silence," Simon said, addressing all these girls, teenagers and women of considerable age. He didn't know what had happened, but he could assume that the Prince Gilgamesh had a plan behind all of this. Initially, all those who chose to follow Gilgamesh believed that their lives wouldn't be much different, but seeing that he paid them no attention and seemed uninterested gave them the reassurance they needed for the night. On the way to the baths, Simon, who had sworn loyalty to his prince, had to ensure that nothing tarnished his prince's reputation. So he said, "First, you won't be able to move around the mansion as you please. You will be placed in the dormitories until the prince decides what to do with you. Second, don't scream or cause any trouble. Besides that, whatever you hear, keep it to yourselves, and don't speak about anything that happens in this mansion." Simon could see that they were slaves, as common as bread on this continent. But unlike other slaves, these seemed to have been kidnapped, judging by their fine faces hidden beneath all the dirt on their bodies. Perhaps nobles, but it wasn't known for sure, and Simon wasn't interested in investigating. The girls, especially the smarter ones, knew who the princes of the kingdom they were in were. There were only 3 men and 1 woman. If they were under the care of the Prince Gilgamesh, who had proven to be extraordinary, no one would complain, and they wouldn't be so foolish as to anger him. After a few long hours, everything seemed to return to normal, but only in the morning would the kingdom be in chaos, as the Prime Minister had been attacked, and 2 of the princes had survived assassination attempts. The blame for all of this would be directed at one person, and that was the first prince who seemed to have a deep desire for the throne. No one in the kingdom was foolish, they had all lived long enough to understand what a change of crown meant. Wars among successors were very common, and they often sent assassins to end each other's lives. But now things had spiraled out of control, as the Prime Minister had been killed, and rumors had it that over 100 swords were driven into him in revenge. Within just an hour, rumors spread everywhere, and people began to suspect. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, walked down to the basement and looked at Icro, the assassin who had come for his life. "Prime Minister Darius Silvaganius is dead, and all the innocents are now in my mansion, under my ownership," Gilgamesh said, looking at the woman lying on the bed. "Now you are free, you have suffered enough, and I forgive you for the sins you have committed. I want you to know that you are the first to be forgiven after attempting to take my life." A golden ripple shimmered near Gilgamesh, and after reaching into it, he pulled out a vial containing crimson liquid. "You are free now. If you leave after taking this medicine, you can escape the kingdom. Tomorrow morning, everyone will be looking for suspicious individuals, but instead, if you choose to stay and be my sword, you could live a different life by my side." The liquid passed down the assassin's throat, and her broken bones healed, wounds on her body disappeared, and she regained her mobility. Gilgamesh walked toward the stairs and said, "It's your decision, and I will respect whatever you choose to do after this." Chapter 25, Gilgamesh's Plan. Early in the morning, Gilgamesh was in his bedroom balcony, gazing at the sunrise with absolute calmness on his face as if the previous events had not been part of his concerns. No one had noticed the assassin of Prime Minister Darius Silvaganius, but these were only speculations by Gilgamesh since no one had come to visit him after that. At that moment, not only Simon but everyone around Gilgamesh's life was trying to read his thoughts. If killing a Sword King could be attributed to luck, then what happened the previous night was purely his skill that allowed him to kill the Prime Minister. Fate was unpredictable, but one couldn't be lucky twice. However, Gilgamesh had now proven himself to all the noble families and sent a strong warning that shook the foundations of the Asura kingdom. This message was simple: anyone who crosses his path will be exterminated, even if they belong to the same royalty. Brother, where have you been all this time? Ariel entered hastily, followed by her personal guard. The concern displayed on the princess's face was more than fake, and her worried attitude was not entirely truthful. She was here to find out what Gilgamesh would do with their elder brother Grabble, who was supported by the faction that had sent them to assassinate Gilgamesh the night before. Sister, I appreciate your concern, but there is nothing in this world that can threaten my life, let alone kill me. Before you go, there's something very important you must know. I don't want you to stand in my way. If you know something of importance to me, tell me. And lastly, stop acting like a fool in front of me. That mask you wear with the nobles won't serve you when you talk to me. Gilgamesh calmly sipped his tea, looked his sister in the eyes, and said, if you come across my brother, tell him I don't care about this wretched throne of this kingdom. But if he continues to insist in front of me, or his henchmen point towards my belongings, I will take this throne and clean up all the filth in the families, streets, and corners of this place. Ariel, who saw that look on her brother's face, shuddered a bit but with a cheerful smile, said, I'm sorry, brother, I tend to do it without thinking. If I see our brother, I'll give him your message, then I'll take my leave. Princess. The man beside Ariel looked at the young Prince Gilgamesh, frowned, and followed the princess. Who would have thought she's such a skillful manipulator? Gilgamesh murmured these words with a smile full of interest. Indeed, all the nobles in this kingdom are a bunch of degenerates. At that moment, heavy footsteps reached Gilgamesh's ears, and he said even before the other party entered, My lord, one of the slaves you took wishes to speak with you. She insists on seeing you. Simon bowed before Gilgamesh and greeted him respectfully. He had heard what had happened last night and was astonished by the details, reaffirming his wise choice of having chosen the fourth prince as his lord. Ah, of course, I wanted to speak with them myself, but if someone is already here, tell her she may come in. Gilgamesh liked the initiative of this woman who wanted to see him. It indicated that there were capable women among the heap of bodies that had been saved. After a few seconds, footsteps sounded, and a woman of around 16 to 18 years old entered, followed by Simon. She was a blonde with short hair and sky-blue eyes, possessing a beautiful figure that could be the envy of many women and the downfall of men. However, in Gilgamesh's eyes, she was just one beauty among the many he had encountered. Take a seat, and I'll pour you a drink. Gilgamesh extended his hand towards the empty seat, and the woman nodded with a calm demeanor. She closed her eyes and took a seat in an elegant manner, displaying her noble upbringing in a single action. Now tell me, what is a noble doing as a slave to a pig? Gilgamesh's naturally cold eyes scrutinized every aspect of the woman in front of him, as if he didn't want to miss any detail. My name is Tina Purple Horse, I am the daughter of House Purple Horse, a noble family of this kingdom. I was abducted when I was 8 years old and forced to serve Darius as a slave ever since. Tina lowered her gaze while gritting her teeth with uncontrollable anger, but she stopped herself upon realizing where she was. She looked at the Prince Gilgamesh, whom she had never had the opportunity to meet before, as he had never appeared in public, even at Ariel's birthday party, where she had attended with her family. Gilgamesh spoke of Darius. He was indeed a greedy man, a pity he was so weak as to withstand only 20 swords on his body. I should have tortured him more, what a shame. Tina immediately said, I appreciate that you saved us from that hell. Now the only thing I can do to repay the favor is by serving you as a slave. Gilgamesh rested his face on his right hand, looked at Tina as if she were already part of his property, and smiled even more when he heard those words from her. His face displayed an amused and noble expression, so he said, You can return to your family if you wish, you don't have to force yourself to serve me when I only did what I believed was right that night. The words took a different direction than what Tina had anticipated. She had decided to serve Gilgamesh, believing it to be a better option than any other available to her. However, this response had never crossed her mind. It hasn't been many years since you were abducted. You can go back to your family and spend some time with them. The traumas you have can gradually fade away, and there's no need for you to serve if you don't wish to. Gilgamesh's sincere words left Tina speechless. She was fortunate that Gilgamesh wasn't interested in her body, unlike other nobles in this kingdom. However, what she didn't know was that everything was going according to the plan he had formulated for his future moves. As a Prince Gilgamesh, he needed the support of some noble families, and one of them that might be interesting to have as support was the Purple Horse family, who would be grateful for the return of their daughter with all her limbs intact. Why did he need a noble family to follow him? Naturally, Gilgamesh could do everything on his own and with much greater ease, but that would require all his available time, something he disliked. That's why a family of knights could serve as an initial stepping stone, as they would take care of his primary needs from now on. What he sought after today was to train a select group of individuals to look after his possessions, protect what mattered to him, and create his own domain without being tainted by the thinking of outsiders. When he returned the lost daughter to that family, he would analyze if they were worthy of her and validate with his own eyes if that house was of his importance. Tristina would be his golden hook to obtain everything he desired. But before that, he needed money, and of course, he didn't want to ask anyone for it. With thousands of ways to acquire money, there was one in particular that was the quickest and most effective. Although he had gold in his vault, he lacked economic knowledge in this world, so he would auction off some of his belongings. This way, he would have sufficient funds to create a progressive plan and depend on his private force to carry out his wishes more easily. Gilgamesh tasted the strawberry tart and said, "I've already sent a letter to your father, they should be here no later than tomorrow. If you believe you don't need them, once you meet with them, you can start following me and, in the future, assist me with my business." "Yes, I thank you, Prince Gilgamesh." Tristina still seemed somewhat stunned by Gilgamesh's response. "Does anyone else know that you killed the Prime Minister?" Tristina asked, concerned for her benefactor. "Choose your words carefully, girl," Simon said with a fierce expression on his face. She understood that what she had said was wrong and wanted to retract it, but Gilgamesh shook his head and said, "They don't know the exact details, but no one should know about this. Nevertheless, even if they did, no one could do anything against me. Well, you should prepare yourself because your family will arrive at my mansion in a few days. For now, I bid you farewell, I have some matters to attend to as soon as possible. Thank you very much for all your help, Prince Gilgamesh. I will never forget it." Tristina bowed gently and took her leave from Gilgamesh, who only smiled at this gesture. With a plan to go to an auction house, Gilgamesh left the mansion in the company of Simon, who simply did his job as the prince's shield.